Oh, hey, Steve. Crazy meeting you here.
Hello, Jeffrey. How are you?
How's it going? We are here on YouTube. I'm going to vamp for a while to let some people find us. We're getting ready to record the first episode of this upcoming week's episode of Inside Black and Gold. We're going to do it again live on YouTube since y'all seemed to enjoy that last time. And what we're going to do this time is at the end, we're going to try to do a live mailbag. I'm going out of town, so we're not going to really have time to record a second episode this week. So I'm going to try to get, and if you throw in enough questions in there, we'll try to get to them all in one final segment, which will give us, and we'll throw that into the second episode for the week so that I can enjoy my 3 days in Montana and not have to think about all of y'all crazy people here in New Orleans dealing with whatever the weather is. So
you're gonna still be juiced in on your phone to everything Saints.
God, I hope not. I hope that there's no cell service so I can just be like, oh, I guess I can't do anything. I'm trying to decide whether I should send out like a PSA, like you won't be seeing tweets from me, but I also think like me not tweeting will be enough of that, right? No one's waiting to see my tweets. I don't think anyone follows me that closely.
They're gonna send FBI agents out. Where are our Saints videos from Jeff?
Yes, they're like, are you okay? Oh, it's like I'm worried that people will think I'm dead or something. Like, what happened? But no, yeah, I'll be out of town. I'm going out of town tomorrow. Getting a couple days up in Montana and then coming back refreshed.
For sure.
For the first week of preseason, I figured it was a good time to get out of Dodge and try to relax. But anyway, so all that said, make sure to throw your comments, questions, hot takes in the feed, and we'll see, if we get enough of them, we'll just run through them in that last segment. And so if you don't see your questions or comments pop up like throughout the majority of the show, there's a good chance we're just hanging on and holding it for that last segment. But just to tell you what you're getting into here. So we're going to talk a lot about Mike Thomas. We're going to talk a lot about the running back battle, behind Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. And we're going to talk about CJ Gardner-Johnson and some of what's going on with him. And, the big question of should the Saints pay CJ? So this isn't the podcast. This is us just kind of vamping. It looks like we have a decent crowd in here, so we can probably get going pretty shortly. How you feeling today, Steve? You got the day off from camp.
Yeah, Veterans Day rest. Feeling good. I'm definitely ready to see some preseason football. I know it's always odd to say, but this point in camp, there's the competition level. You just want to see it amped up that next notch against a different team instead of the same guy.
After the second week, it's like a grind, and you're just trying to. It's like, okay, the football's close. Did you watch the Hall of Fame game?
I watched more of the lightning delay that I kept seeing flash on the screen than I did the actual game. I
watched a grand total of 0 seconds of that game. I didn't even like consider turning it on, and I was proud of myself for that. It's like it's too early. It's not football season yet. I can't force my fiance to watch that. Like that's usually the trigger for me. It's like a lot of games I can be like, yeah, this is worth watching. Yeah, I mean, you're kind of bored, but I'm studying, right? I gotta know. That is not the case for the Hall of Fame game.
It's kind of on, but in the background, like just that ambient noise. That's all it really.
Well, I mean, I'll do that. I'll watch stuff on my phone to not like force her to watch it. But I'm not doing that for the Hall of Fame. I'm not doing that to watch the third string Jaguars play the third string whatever else.
Well, that game was proof, like another reason why I do not gamble on sports. Everybody was saying there was like 8 straight years that the game hit the under, and everyone's like, you got to take the under on this game. There's no, take the under. Of course, it hit the over.
Austin watched it. Sorry.
Sorry you went through that.
So Jerry, you were out at camp today. Yeah, that was a bummer. I always feel bad when all the fans are out there. And we can get into this on the podcast a little bit. I always feel bad when they're all out there and they all have their balls and their jerseys and they got their pens and they're all excited. And then, we'll get into this on the podcast. But yeah, that's what happened today. That's a bummer, Jerry. I'm sorry that you didn't get to see a lot of that. But so again, we're gonna get into a lot of this, and it's just a matter of how we're gonna get started. As always, as we did last week, this is just the raw version of the podcast, so we're just gonna kind of talk through stuff. And so you might hear us like go back and re-record stuff. We don't have a promo to record this time, Oh, he wasn't there. He was in Gulfport. Wait, I'm confused. You said that you wanted to see it. I don't understand. Anyway, well.
Oh, maybe because there were no highlights because everything.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. Yeah, once they go inside,
shut it down. Why is that the case though?
Huh?
What I find funny too, even when we're outside and all of a sudden, there's a limited period now for even the media when they can film. But if we were a fan in the stands with our cell phone, you can still shoot away.
Yeah, I mean, I found a clip of Mike Thomas in one-on-ones
right?
That was shot from the from the stands, and I retweeted it because, I mean, I guess I'm not disallowed
that's
to
pretty
retweet
silly,
it.
right? It's like, why are we doing it?
It's like they can do it, but we can't. And I understand when it's like
closed
the full team drills because they're trying to install stuff and they don't want that on tape. And okay, but the one-on-ones, why? Is it because people feel bad for like Trayvon Diggs, who deleted his Twitter account because he kept getting videos posted about him with like practice squad receivers running by him? Like, is that who we're trying to protect? Are we worried about the egos of these millionaire NFL players that don't want to have these clips shown? Because that's what it feels like. Anyway, okay, we're gonna record this podcast tonight. I promise. So, Steve, do you want to lead us in to the pod? Okay.
Are we having the open, or is it just going to be cold?
What do you mean?
Is there the whole open like that comes on beforehand, or
I'm not going to play it.
Right. That's what I was wondering.
I mean, it'll be on the podcast when it's there, but you're not going to have it right now. Do you want me to lead you in? Do you want me to give you a drum roll?
No. I was just wondering if I had to wait for anything or just
go for it. Someday when we're doing this, we might have more infrastructure and actual lead-in music. But for now, it's raw, baby.
I love it.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Steve Geller alongside Jeff Nowak, sharing our takes on New Orleans Saints football. Preseason game numero uno this weekend with the Saints playing at Houston. Jeff, are you more excited for our pregame show? First take, 3 p.m. Saturday on WWL Radio, or seeing the Saints unleash the Northern Iowa assassin Trevor Penning on the Texans?
I'm going to be completely honest. I had completely forgotten that I was going to be on the pregame show until you brought it up. So thank you for the reminder. Now I'm excited. It's going to be a good time. The game will be kind of boring, but there's going to be a lot to talk about coming out of it, actually, because, and we're going to get into this, the running back battle preseason is going to be fascinating. We're probably not going to see Alvin Kamara or Mark Ingram, but those aren't the guys I need to see. I need to see everybody else. We're going to get into that in the second segment today. We're going to kind of rank who we think is kind of at what level in that kind of four-way race for the third running back spot. I'd
wrap up Alvin Kamara now. Just put him away.
You think he's going to make it? You think he's going to make the roster, Alvin?
He's made it, and I don't need to see any more. I think he's proven that he's got that spot.
Wrap him in bubble wrap and move on. But but before that, we're going to get into a lot about Mike Thomas. Big week for Mike Thomas. A lot of steps forward. We're going to talk about Tyron Matthew getting into team drills today. That was big. We're going to talk about a beef that has been squashed. We can put it to bed. No one's mad at each other. They're just boys being boys. They're fighting, and then they're fine with it. And we're going to talk about that. We talked to Trevor. We didn't talk to Trevor Penning. We talked to Peyton Turner today. I have a hard time getting those names right because they have opposite initials. You have PT and TP, right?
And you're flipping them in your head.
There's a nickname there. They're going to be best friends, and it's going to be great. So we're going to get into that. And in the final segment, we're going to ask the burning question that I'm not sure we're going to get an answer to before the end of training camp. Should the Saints break the bank, rather, for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, for the quote-unquote top slot corner in the NFL? I say quote-unquote because that's what he told us he was. And we're going to get into a lot of that. But first, okay, let's break down what we saw from Michael Thomas this week. And a lot of the fans saw it too, because it really started on Friday with Mike Thomas getting into one-on-one reps for the first time. Was it Friday or was it Thursday? I think it was Friday. Do you remember?
One-on-ones the first time was
No, it was Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Friday. It was yesterday. Well, as we record this, it was a day ago. And so he finally got into those one-on-one reps. He had previously worked in 7-on-7s, then got a day off. And we were talking, I keep asking DA, okay, what's the latest? What's the latest? What's the latest? And this is the second time now that he has said pretty soon or soon, and soon has meant tomorrow morning. So keep that in mind.
Which is a big difference actually from Sean Payton, because I remember sooner rather than later with Jarius Byrd kept going on forever.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it because when someone says soon and they don't give you an actual date or time, you hope that it's soon. And at that, it's been established that when Dennis says soon, it's tomorrow morning, because he took part in one-on-ones. We asked him about it afterward, and he said, he's really encouraged with what he's seen. And, Saturday morning, we all got out there and we're like, okay, let's see how much work Michael Thomas gets in. And not only was he in one-on-ones, not only was he in 7-on-7s, he was in every single team session for the day. And when you look at a guy who's just had training wheels on this entire camp thus far, and we haven't seen in more than a year in a competitive football game, man, that's just so confidence building. And we have a clip from DA today because, as I said, I ask him about this every day, and this is what he had to say today.
Along the same lines, Mike Thomas got into 11-on-11 today
Yeah.
for the first time.
Yeah, I told you it was coming sooner rather than later, right?
What did you see from him, and how confidence building is that for him to just be able to get that done this early?
Yeah, look, I think good. Look, honestly, there's a couple times he ended up on the ground. I think that's all part of the process and building that confidence. I think he's in a good mindset right now. I think he looks good physically. I'm excited about where he's at.
So is there anything that stood out to you in that answer from DA, Steve?
Definitely about, Thomas going to the ground.
Yep.
Was huge just because of the physicality, obviously being able to take the hits and actually playing football, not just running routes and being able to cut, but the physicality of the game as well.
Right. There's a point where the training wheels have to come off, the bubble wrap has to come off, and just have to trust that this guy can go play football and not get hurt, and that's always, to me, the most difficult part of trying to bring someone back from injury, because there's a mental element there where you're just not comfortable with your own body. You're not comfortable with the fact that you can stay healthy. And he took some hits. They were not intentional. There was a point that he was going up against Quentin Meeks, who's a player that the Saints signed today after a tryout. He was wearing number 43, and they got kind of tangled up in a 7-on-7 rep. And Mike went down as he went up to catch the ball, and he got taken to the ground. And it was like, man, you got to be imagining like Pete Carmichael's over there. If number 43 hurts Mike Thomas on first day, he is gone. He does not have the clout to injure a receiver and survive on this roster. So you had to imagine and Quentin knows that. You had to imagine when they went down, he was just had his football life flash before his eyes. He finally gets a chance. He's a USFL guy to come into an NFL roster, and the first thing he does is, accidentally tackle Mike Thomas. But he was fine.
But like you said, that's part of it. That's part of the game itself. There has to be that physicality element and taking off the training wheels. We've seen them doing the quote unquote ramping up process with Mike T. But they're, from what happened in the past with whether it's miscommunication with the team, the setbacks from the surgery, I think that they've done everything since the start of training camp has been above where I thought Michael Thomas would have been. So I think there's definitely been a huge positive with him this entire camp.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like he's been off the field longer than he has been in terms of okay, he wasn't out there for OTAs, he wasn't out there for mini camp, and I think there was reasonable concern that those absences would leak into camp. And the fact that they haven't, he's had two scheduled rest days. He had 3 days on and a rest day. He had another 3 days on and a rest day. So now, he got the work in. He's got a rest day tomorrow kind of baked in. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see him get another rest day next week. And I think that's going to continue. I don't think that part of the ramp up process is over. But, it's funny because, Mike got up. He was fine after that hit. And like I said, Quentin probably had his life flash before his eyes. But, you had DA coming out and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that he's getting the feel for contact And, so he can get comfortable in that ankle. He's taking routes out of bounds. He's being physical with defensive backs. And, we're still grading him on a curve. It kind of struck me today. He didn't have a great day of practice in terms of like execution. I think he was, this is the first full practice he's gone through. And I think he might've been dragging a little bit by the end of it. But like, he had a ball, hit him on the hands and kind of deflect away. And he ended up catching it. But that's not if you're Mike Thomas in practice, that he's walking away like, cursing at himself because that's just not up to his standard. He got clamped by Bradley Roby downfield. There was a physical play and Bradley got the better of him. And then Jameis just dumped it off to Kamara, and I think if you had this practice in 2019, Mike would say it was a terrible day. And down the road, you might want to see him execute better on some of these routes, but that's just not what we're going to talk about right now because the most important thing, the only thing that matters is getting him back on the field. And once you do that, then you can start to worry about the results.
Do you think we see him preseason game number 1?
Absolutely not.
Or do you? I
don't think
you
he's even
hold him back more.
I don't think he's even dressed for preseason game 1. I don't think we see him on the field. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see him on the field at all in the preseason. You might see him get a few snaps in one of the games.
I would think you'd want to, and he would want to as well. Obviously,
you've seen how they've operated.
The ramp up period would have to be one of the preseason games. I don't need to see like a guy like Kamara. I know what he's got already and is ready to go.
We know what Mike's got. Well, we just don't want to see him get hurt in the preseason when in a game that doesn't matter.
I just want to see him get acclimated more to football speed and being more of that physical guy he can be.
I mean, I think he's going to be less involved week 1, maybe week 2 than he would be normally. But that's part of the reason you brought in Jarvis. So you can have that kind of premier, possession receiver that lets you be a little patient with Mike Thomas. I don't think you see him for more than maybe one series the entire preseason.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're gonna play him like a whole quarter, but I would definitely want him at least to get in a series just to get back into the field because it has been so long for him.
For sure. One guy who I think we will see in the preseason is Tyron Matthew, who he's another guy who got into full 11s today. And he's a veteran. He's a guy who you probably, I say today, we're recording this on Saturday, just to be clear. He's a guy who you probably would say, he doesn't need to play in the preseason in most seasons. This year, I don't think that's true. I think you need to get him on the field with Marcus May so that you can start to build that communication, that kind of camaraderie in the secondary. Because, we saw a couple years ago when the Saints brought in Malcolm Jenkins and he was trying to kind of gel with Marcus Williams. If you remember early in the 2020 season, he was just big play after big play after big play. The Chargers game stands out where, Mike Williams was just dunking on him. And that's something you don't want to see this year. The Saints need to start well, I think, this season. And you can't be trying to make up for 70-yard bombs over the top of your head. And I think that these are two veteran players. They'll gel, they'll coalesce pretty quickly, but you do want to see them in the preseason and get that kind of live game. Like, I think seeing that in live game action is far more important than, trying to get some reps out of Mike Thomas, because that's just a huge part of the secondary that's changing. You don't know what it's going to look like, and you need to see it in game action.
That was definitely something for me heading into this camp that was high on my list of things I wanted to see, was just the communication going on in the secondary, because of how locked down I felt when Malcolm Jenkins came in, along, his work obviously with Marcus Williams, and just getting everybody in that secondary on the same page, because you were mentioning those so many long ball opportunities, the busted plays, busted coverages we're seeing, guys having their hands up, pointing at one another kind of thing. And
right.
I felt like him retiring was a bigger hit than maybe most people realize, because of that aspect, not just obviously the talent on the field, but also the leadership and communication to everybody. But I loved what Tyron Matthew was saying, that, he knows he's got to get on the same page with these guys. And one of the things is that he learned from his days with the Arizona Cardinals, playing with guys like Patrick Peterson and Calais Campbell over there was that bond, not only on the field, but off of it. That's so key too. And I know that's going to be really something that is going to take time, obviously, but I'm pretty confident they're going to get on the same page. But you definitely want to see that in the preseason because it is fresh. We got 2 new starting safeties.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, which it kind of feels like, Malcolm Jenkins retiring, you just slot Tyron in there and you're fine. But, that's a more significant change than that. It's not just because Tyron is a 10-year veteran doesn't mean that kind of just camaraderie is there from the jump. You got to build that.
And not even talking about, obviously, everyone says the Honey Badger is this. I'm not going to say he's not better at taking the football away than Malcolm Jenkins, but it's just the bond, the camaraderie, and just knowing that guy next to you so well that you kind of steps ahead. Like you're both playing chess instead of checkers out there. Obviously,
they're also different players. I mean, Malcolm later in his career, at least, was more of a pounder. He was more of a strong safety. Right. And so you don't have those defined roles this year. And that's going to be another thing that you want to figure out is, as DA says, and it's a buzzword, multiplicity. You're going to see Tyron and Marcus both playing strong, both playing free, not at the same time. You understand what I'm saying? They're gonna switch back and forth, try to confuse the offense a little bit, try to gain an edge. And I think that's something you gotta practice. You gotta work on that. One guy we have not seen out at camp, and I also would be stunned if we see him in any preseason games, is Marcus Davenport. We actually heard from Ryan Nielsen today, and he had, I don't want to say an answer. I don't want to say a timeline, but he said words.
An inkling.
And to be fair, before we get into this, Marcus Davenport has been working. We have seen him. He's rehabbing, quote unquote rehabbing. They say it's more about conditioning than health, which is good. And I think you're just trying to get him healthy and make sure you get to the season with him healthy. But this is what Ryan Nielsen had to say today on Marcus and when we might expect him back.
And I know we haven't seen Marcus Davenport yet, but what work is he putting behind the scenes to get ready, and how close is he just in terms of the preparation part to be ready to jump?
So I'll answer the first one, not the second one. All right. So the first one, he is doing everything that is asked of him. I see him in the weight room. I see him on the field. He's getting back. But I'm not going to answer the second part of the question. But he's doing what he needs to do, and he'll be back when he's supposed to be back.
He'll be back when he is supposed to be back.
Week 1 at Atlanta.
Does that mean? Does it mean week 1? I guess it does.
That's when he should be back,
everyone
right?
was supposed to be back for training camp. Well, what do I know? I'm kidding. But Ryan gave an excellent interview today. That's one of the first times we've gotten to talk to him since he kind of ascended into that role. So I don't want to give him too much grief, but that's kind of a tough answer on what exactly we're looking at. Like, he's doing all the work he's asked, but they won't tell us what work he's asked. They won't give us a timeline. So we're kind of just sitting here waiting. I think he's going to be fine.
We're going to have to wait for Dennis Allen to tell us sooner rather than later, and then he'll be there the next day.
Yeah. Once Dennis says soon, then we can start throwing the party because he'll be on the field the next morning. That's what we've learned. But we did see Marcus today. We've seen him at camp. He's doing conditioning work, so he's engaged. It could be worse. I've been saying for a while now, it kind of feels like if you can get 17 games combined out of Peyton Turner and Marcus Davenport, that's a win. And because you have 17 out of Cam on the other side. If you can get like 9 out of Peyton, 8 out of Marcus, I think that's a win for how the Saints have. Yes, and as Austin says, don't forget the ramp up period.
Drink.
So, yeah, who knows? Yeah, well, he's going to come back week 1. He's going to be like in one snap and like, oh, we're done. Anyway, no.
Another guy too. What we're seeing from Carl Grandison is somebody that's definitely going to be pushing for some of those snaps on rushing the passer for sure. Because I feel like every practice he's someone that for sure you're taking a note on or that's standing out with his rush.
Yes, and his favorite restaurant is Bobby Hebert's.
Yes.
We interviewed him yesterday, and Bobby actually talked to him about that. because he said that last year. It was during his interview last year. He was talking about how he was bulking up and eating at this cool restaurant called Bobby Hebert's. And meanwhile, Bobby Hebert is standing right next to him just laughing. And we talked to him yesterday, and Bobby brought it up because he never figured out that was the case. And it was like, you saw the look on his face was like, he was like starstruck. It was hilarious.
He had Bobby Hebert right there.
Yeah, the great Bobby Hebert right in front of me. His favorite dish is the Mardi Gras pasta. Anyway,
good choice.
But yeah, Carl has been excellent, and I think that when we look back at kind of Marcus being absent and Peyton missing a few days early in camp, Peyton Turner, him being able to get those first team reps will be valuable, because I think you're gonna need to count on him at points throughout the season. But speaking of Peyton Turner, we have squashed the beef. Okay, there's no beef. First 3 days of practice this week, and we talked about it in the last pod extensively. We had fisticuffs. We had malarkey. We had anger, just anger, pain. It was bad.
Aggression.
It was not the case the last 3 days of camp. DA just lit. He lit into him. He was mad. And I'm sure he let Trevor have it in the locker room. I'm sure he let Malcolm Roach have it in the locker room. To their credit, JT Gray, who was one of the guys that got in a fight with Trevor, that was on Tuesday. He brushed it off. It's like, this is just, this is what happens. It's football. Trevor kind of said the same thing about Peyton Turner, and we got to talk to Peyton Turner today. So, I made sure to ask him, and he just laughed it off. And like, this is like people are going to make a huge deal out of this. They did. Trevor Penning now has this reputation for being this bully, which, I guess he already had, and I guess that's not the worst reputation to have as an offensive lineman. You want that kind of edge, but like, everyone's talking about him. Pat McAfee's talking about it. Pat McAfee loved it, by the way. It's like this national story that Trevor Penning is fighting people in practice. So this is what Peyton Turner had to say on the subject today when I asked him about it.
So Peyton, just to get the elephant in the room, obviously the dust up with you and Trevor made some waves. What happened there from what you can explain, and how is that thing?
We're just competing. That's how it gets out here, especially in pads, especially in the trenches. Everybody knows that. Camp's long, camp's hard, camp's physical. So it's just nothing big, just two guys competing, nothing big though.
And were you kind of surprised that probably more people were talking about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say surprised. I thought it was funny, but that's just that it's Trevor. But I mean, he's just competing, playing hard, and just a learning element to it as well. But seen it a little bit prior to us getting pads on, that he was through all the way through the whistle. But I mean, that's just him competing and just playing hard. So it is what it is. I don't think it's any big deal. Just like I said, just an aspect of learning to practice with your teammates.
And I think that last bit was the biggest kernel of truth in that answer. I do think genuinely that none of these players are mad at each other. I think they got the point they needed to get across. They're not going to back down from each other, whatever. But that last sentence, it's a learning thing. It's learning how to practice with your teammates.
Right.
And because the issue was not, okay, Trevor is doing anything that would get you thrown out of a game or even get you a penalty in a game. He's just blocking his teammates like they're opponents, and your teammates are going to take umbrage to that because they don't want to be put in situations where they could get hurt in practice. And if you're Peyton Turner, you missed your entire rookie season, right? Now he played in 3 games, but you missed a vast majority of your rookie season trying to deal with injuries, trying to get healthy. And the last thing you want to be dealing with is another just stupid injury early in camp because this jagweed rookie is just trying to prove a point, and so that's why you get heated, you get on the field. But Peyton, I've talked to Peyton a few times now. I talked to him in the offseason, I talked to him in minicamp, I talked to him now. He is one of the most easygoing, personalities you'll ever find. Like, when I asked him about it, he's just this huge smile across his face. Like, he does not care about this fight any more than he has to. And I think we can just stop talking about it now.
I think with Peyton Turner, though, it's like everybody secretly likes the bad guy and they want to see more kind of thing with him, obviously. I think it is funny. You look at social media, there's so many fight videos going around about Peyton Turner. And I really think that we hear about Michael Thomas practicing like he plays. So we're seeing that also from Peyton Turner. So it's hard for him to take it down that notch, even though you're going against your own teammates. I understand obviously where he's coming from, because you're taking every rep like that Super Bowl rep kind of deal, and he's giving it his all. And that's just his game. And I don't think it's hard, because it is such a physical point of attack there in the trenches. And it's a lot different than being a wide receiver and DB going at it kind of deal. That's why I'm really looking forward, obviously, to the joint practices against the Packers to see what Penning.
See how many people try to fight Trevor Penning.
Exactly, it's going to be like NFL Fight Club in Green Bay,
and I think he'll get applauded if that's the case.
Right? Sure, everyone will be like, okay, who can gang up and take the big guy down?
All right. Well, we're going to hit the break on that note. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the running backs that aren't named Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, because there are a lot of them, and I still don't know what to make of it. Stick around. All right. Now, I'm going to hit you with a commercial. Not that because we have commercials or need them. I just need to go get a drink of water, and I don't want you staring at the wall behind me. So, there you go.
Hit it.
Oh, hey, I'm back. It's me in a hat.
What a good promotion.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a podcast. We're not live yet, but we are live, but we're not into the second segment yet. First, I just thank you for everyone who's sticking around. We have, a whole bunch of people watching in here. It blows my mind every time because I don't even advertise these. People just show up. Austin wants people to hit like again. So do that. Hit the like button. Share it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your mom. Share it with your dog.
Sharing is definitely caring.
Yeah. And so just a reminder, we're going to be doing a live mailbag in the back end of the show. So if you have any questions, throw them in the comments, and don't get worried if we don't get to them throughout some of these segments. We're going to get to them at the back end, and we're going to throw it into kind of a live mailbag show to post in the middle of the week, because I'm getting out of Dodge. I'm going to Montana. So we need stuff to talk about in that portion of the show. So make sure you throw your questions in there. Tell me how you disagree with all of my takes, and we'll get after it.
You watch Yellowstone at the show Yellowstone at all?
I've not seen it. No.
Okay, that's based in Montana. That's why I was asking.
I did start watching The Boys season 3. Have you watched that at all?
No, I have not seen that.
Oof, it's harsh. It's if you ask me all the time if like there are shows that if it's appropriate for your child, don't show them that one.
Okay.
Whew. That's just gets crazier and crazier. And if anyone's here that's watched it, they will understand immediately what I'm talking about. The goriest show I've ever seen, but it's still good.
Okay.
They do it well. Like if you're gonna do gore, you got to do it right, and they do it right. Anyway, so we're gonna get into this segment. We're gonna talk about the running backs. We're gonna have a lot of sound thrown at you, and so get ready.
Prime
Steve, you want to bring us in?
Back for another segment of Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller alongside Jeff Nowak. And we see a running back competition. We know that Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram are basically your number 1-2 guys. But after that, there's a lot of questions. Obviously, who's going to be that third guy? And I think for a while we were kind of wondering who's going to be the guy to step up when Kamara has to serve the suspension. But that seems like it's kind of on the back burner now. And a lot of folks are but it's been mentioned that this could even possibly carry over into next season for AK.
Yes, that's definitely true. But you have to plan for it. You can't just assume it's not going to happen.
Right.
And, even if that's the plan, even if AK and AK's camp are trying to track it out, which I think is probably what's going on, because I think if you're the Saints, you have, if you're the Saints, if you're Alvin, if you're DA, you want to make sure that this first season of a new head coaching era does not have the significant disadvantage of not having your star running back for 6 games. And you already have to plan some kind of injury adjustment in there because, running backs get hurt. So that's not what you want to deal with. But
you mentioned fast start last segment, and that's so key. Obviously, first 3 games, boom, NFC South opponent. So you have to come out the gates on fire.
Yeah, and the NFC South is probably the weakest of the opponents that you're going to get. So you got to beat those teams. But so the running backs that we have kind of to consider here. So, and even when I talked to Divine today, he kind of put this in there, which is like RB1 is set. You got Alvin. RB2 is set. You got Mark. RB4 is set.
Right. That's true.
You have Dwayne Washington. He's going to be on the roster. So there is one spot, and it's going to be RB3. And that's literally, and if you're wondering whether that is the case, whether the team understands that, Divine literally said that. He said the RB3 spot. And that's what they're competing for because you're assuming they're going to keep 4 players. So the names that you have to consider: Malcolm Brown, veteran signed right before training camp; Tony Jones Jr., TJJ, the owner of 2 dogs, and 2 drops; Divine Ezigbo, a guy who seems to be back every year but never makes the roster; and Abram Smith, the UDFA out of Baylor, who just likes to run over people. And you just kind of have to make a decision between one of those 4 guys. So you look at how are you going to separate yourself, and that's why the preseason games are going to be so massive, because that's your moment. That's your moment to actually do that. And I talked to Divine about that today to kind of get his read on it, because I can sit here and tell you all day that these guys are going to be stressing and trying to put their best foot forward in these preseason games, because it could be what makes or breaks their spot on this roster. But I'll just let Divine tell you for himself.
Yeah, at the top of the depth chart, obviously Alvin and Mark. But behind them, I feel like there's a really steep competition for just kind of depth spots. And so when you go into the preseason, how do you approach that? Because does it feel kind of like, okay, this is my chance to really just showcase why I should be on the roster?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of things that, that 3 spot that you're kind of talking about is going to have to do. And these games are going to be a great way to see if, that guy that can fill that spot. Because, typically to try to make the plays that are available to me, just make the most of them. But there's things that I need to do on special teams, things that I need to do catching the ball, run blocking, or blocking and running, just making sure when those opportunities come, I display the best of my ability.
Is that a situation where you can kind of get in your own head, too, where you kind of just want to go out there and do your thing, but, if you put too much on it and you start, pressing, is that something that can happen?
I mean, it's definitely always, it's everything you have to manage, you know what I mean? Like, because, you want to do great. Everybody puts a lot of pressure on themselves to be as successful as we know we can be. So going out there and trying to do it every single time, if you let that sit on you, it could be a hindering factor, but you just got to know, go out there, do your best, play free, and then those good plays will come when opportunities are, just take advantage.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I think that Divine has a significant advantage over Abram Smith and Tony Jones Jr. in the showcase element, because this isn't going to phase him. He's done this. He's competed for a roster spot in the preseason. He was very good for the Saints in the preseason when they brought him into the UDFA. I think that was the 2019 season. He looked good in those games. He played well enough that the Jags picked him up on waivers. So I think he's a guy who is going to surprise some people who might not think that he is going to be as competitive for this roster spot as he will be. One note I will make is this guy has the biggest arms in a running back I've ever seen.
Swole,
it's
for
crazy.
Sure. You could put him up there with Jamal Lewis.
Yeah, and Ahmad Bradshaw comes to mind, Thomas Jones, like guys with arms that are way bigger than they have to be.
Oh man,
Thomas Jones, who's now an actor apparently,
I think he's got his own actually workout videos too, if you want to get swole like Thomas Jones, because he's got some pretty amazing biceps, obviously.
I think he was in the second season of Luke Cage. I think that's where I saw him last.
Really?
He's
Oh,
actually,
man, I
he's an
didn't know
actor
that.
now. And I remember when he showed up and I was like, wait, is that Thomas Jones, the football player? But yeah, Devine Ezigbo is the new bicep king of the NFL. And what I keep reminding people is not only is he a big dude, he's the biggest running back on the roster, and that includes Ingram and Kamara. He's probably, behind Kamara, the second best receiving running back on the roster.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've seen more of his talents as a receiver, I feel, than a running back.
Yeah. And that's the question I have is, can he run between the tackles? And I think, he's big enough to do that. It's just a question of whether he can. But he's a guy who I'm excited to see in the preseason because everyone wants to talk about Abram Smith. Everyone remembers Tony Jones from last year. And I think that he's a guy who is ready to kind of prove his worth. He's only 25. He's young, and the Saints keep bringing him back. But, obviously there are other guys here, right? And I'm curious what your impression has been of Abram Smith throughout the first, 2 weeks of camp.
Those three backs really have been all close. And like you mentioned, between the preseason games, even the dual workouts, the joint workouts with the Packers, I just want to see him more going against another team because it's not, you're not seeing a full thud at practice with these guys. So you don't have the same impact of knowing really what Abram Smith's power can do. But I want to see him truck somebody on the Houston Texans or Green Bay Packers because I know he's not going to do that in practice here.
I like that, a full thud. You're not getting a full thud. The only guy I've seen give a full thud has been Smoke Monday, and unfortunately he's not around anymore. So
exactly. See what happens when you give him full thuds when you're not supposed to be.
We need those heavy thudders. But no, and that's kind of what, we're going to have. I've been able to talk to all four of these guys over the last couple of weeks. And we talked to Abram today, and that was kind of what I asked him about was,
he sounds like a seasoned vet already for the young kid.
He does. He presents himself well. He answers questions well. And, what I kind of asked him about was, he's a guy who he's not going to shine in the early practices the way that he probably will toward the end because he's a physical back. He wants to lean on you. He wants to make you feel him.
He's a former linebacker.
Right. He was a linebacker at Baylor, and then he switched over to running back for his senior season, and he set records. He wants to go through you, and he can't do that in unpadded practices. And once the pads come on, things seem to change for him a little bit, and he has really good balance. His vision is what I might question a little bit. I think that he's been slow to identify some holes just so far in camp, and that's not unusual for a rookie running back. And I don't think that's a slight to him. I think it's just reality. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of handles that with full blocking, with guys actually trying to tackle him. But this is what Abram had to say today when I asked him about that.
It's such a physical, brand of runner. Is it a different game for you when the pads are on versus when the pads are off?
It's definitely a different type of game. With the pads off, of course, it's like thud tempo. You kind of got to slow it down. But when the pads come on, you can, duck that shoulder down on somebody and kind of give somebody a speed and bullet is what we like to call in the room. And I mean, I think for me, that's where everybody kind of just comes out and like who's real and who's fake. And just when the pads come on for me, it's a different type of feeling.
Was there anything in that answer that stood out to you?
Just that, the contact he's talking about. We were just mentioning that he's. I just think that it's hard to practice without pads at that position, along with your offensive lineman, defensive line. We've heard it so many times before. Football is in pads and.
Yeah, not in panties, as Alante Taylor calls them.
Or what Dennis Allen was saying, your underwear.
Yes, but Tay Taylor, by the way, he wants to be called Tay. He referred to them as like shirts and panties, which
because
he didn't even laugh. I couldn't tell if he was making a joke or not.
Even just having your pads on is a different experience from catching
like a football player.
From even just running routes and catching is going to be different for me. It's a lot more cumbersome, obviously. So there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of different feels that you get from being in full pads. But I just think that these running backs will get so much more, obviously, in the preseason games because it's going to be a full go. You're full live instead of it being any kind of restraint from any guys.
No doubt. So there were two things that stood out to me specifically in that. One, the term speeding bull, which I haven't heard before, but I'm going to start using.
Seeing red, I guess.
Huh?
Seeing red.
Yes. I'm going to give you a speeding bull next time I see you. I'm going to practice up in Bozeman. I'm going to come back and tackle you full speed. But the second one was when the pads come on, you find out who's real and who's fake. Which
right.
I wonder who's fake. Because it sounds like someone's fake. I don't know who it is. But
no, I just think it's another way of saying, too, you separate from the men from the boys kind of deal. But that's for real. You could look great in just your shorts, but when your pads come on and people start, like Trevor Penning, you start pushing and shoving, you getting physical, it's a lot different.
But right. So it's like the term separating the men from the boys, except in this case, you have boys that are pretending to be men.
Well,
I just think it's funny. I thought it was a really interesting way for him to phrase that answer. And it's basically, I think that's his mentality, right? He wants to show you that you are not tough enough to tackle him
right
at full speed with pads on. And I think he's ready. He wants that moment, so that's why I'm really excited. I'm not usually excited for preseason football, but I think that kind of position battle is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, there's definitely, like you said, when you can break it down that way and you're looking at positions and you're seeing a lot of young
score.
Yeah, no, exactly. Who cares? But you want to see these position battles that everybody's been talking about at training camp, actually in that live game situation, because you could be, we joke around at practice that you might be a Metairie all-star, but can you do it when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling kind of deal? Because it is a lot different. We've seen that so many times before when everybody's talking about somebody at camp and then they just don't show up come game time.
Yeah. No, and so the guy they don't show up come game time. We kind of saw that last year with the third guy on this list, and that's a guy I really like. I enjoy talking to him. He gives really good answers in interviews, and he was really impressive last year throughout training camp is Tony Jones Jr. I mean, he made Latavius Murray expendable.
Right.
You didn't just cut Latavius Murray. Latavius got outplayed. Latavius was not the second best option to keep on the roster, and the Saints got rid of him because Tony was that good. And I was all in on the hype train for Tony Jones Jr. last year. He's built like a fire hydrant. He has good vision. He can cut. He's got speed. The question I had throughout camp has been, can he catch? And he did not display a very attractive skill set early in camp. He had two really bad drops. I think he can catch. It's more about concentration than the ability to catch a football. But, that's just not the foot you want to put forward. That's not where you want to be after a week of camp. And, but he has stacked a few really impressive days. He had a gorgeous catch on a wheel route yesterday or on Friday. And I think that he's kind of picked up his stock a lot closer to where Abram and Divine are in my eyes over the last few days heading into the first preseason game.
Yes. So I think Abram's probably got the toughest path, obviously, as the undrafted free agent, the guy that hasn't been in the system. Both these guys know Pete Carmichael Jr. a little more, have been have some NFL experience as well. But I'm curious to see, like I said, I think it really comes down to a Zigbo or Tony Jones Jr. for that third spot. I think they'll try and stash a guy like Abram Smith on the practice squad.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough part is, can you stash him on the practice squad if you wanted to? And I'm not sure you could.
I guess depending, what we see in the preseason for sure.
I mean, it's like they had Boston Scott, Abram Smith, or Divine a couple years ago. Like, I think that the Saints have a pretty good track record for bringing in depth at the running back position. And
So
so
good.
other teams are aware of that, and they're going to start looking. And other teams are going to be needing that depth. And if one of these guys shows off in the preseason and doesn't make the roster, that's where you start to wonder if other teams are going to come calling.
It sounds like we're both kind of like we're not in the Malcolm Brown camp, and I think he's a guy that definitely you might keep on the short list just in case, kind of emergency. But yeah, I think he ends up not with the team after camp.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm Brown is Malcolm Brown. By this point in his career, you know what he is. He said early when we talked to him last week, right? After he got signed, that he's aging like a fine wine. That's a direct quote. I'm not sure. I think he's aging. I don't know how good the wine is. I think he can still play. I just think there's too much upside with some of the younger guys.
Right.
That it would be a shame to cut them loose and not give them an opportunity to kind of grow into that role. The way you've allowed other guys to do it over the years. And I think having a guy like Malcolm around throughout the preseason is really valuable to some of these younger guys. But I don't see him as a serious contender to make the roster. What I will say for Malcolm is he's incredible balance. I don't think I've seen him at the ground once. They like every time he goes through, he'll get hit, he'll get bounced around. He always keeps his feet. And we saw that in the Superdome in 2018 when he had that kind of tightrope touchdown over Marcus Williams, definitely not missing a tackle. And that's something he does really well. And maybe he does. Maybe he shows up in the preseason and just balls out and makes it so you just can't cut him.
You just make a low key Marcus Williams dig,
huh?
You just did like a little low key Marcus Williams dig.
Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus Williams has never missed a tackle in his life. He's the greatest tackler of all time. The Saints won a Super Bowl because he never missed a tackle. Just kidding.
That was still one of the oddest plays, obviously, to witness.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. But yeah, so you think if you had to handicap this right now,
yeah,
you would put Tony Jones. Who would you pick if you had to pick it today? Actually, no. Let's phrase that differently. Who is your prediction for who will make that? Who will make the roster in that out of those four guys? Assuming they keep four running backs, which they might not.
I would say that they're going to continue their development of Tony Jones Jr. I think I would go with. I know that the question is obviously his receiving ability, but I think that we heard Dennis Allen talk a little bit about him and saying that obviously he's a young kid that they believe in and they're trying to move him along in the process. And I know he dealt with that ankle injury last year, so we'll see. I'm hoping to see more from him in this role. And I'm a little biased too because I have him on my Dynasty fantasy team.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be starting him even if he makes the roster. But I do think so. I actually asked about his receiving ability because I've been talking so much trash about his receiving over the last few days. So I felt like I should at least get an answer from him before I continue talking about it. And this is what he had to say about his receiving ability.
I've always been a receiver out the backfield, but nobody just never thought to ask me could I do it. So now now Coach sees it, so now I get to show what I can do. And I just got to keep taking stuff from Mike T's game, from Jarvis' game, all of them, and just try to put it in my toolbox.
No one asked me to do it.
No one asked him. I'm the greatest receiver on the team, but no one asked me to catch the ball.
He's getting pointers from Mike T.
To his credit, he has excelled since that rough day. He's had a lot of really nice runs.
We all have bad days, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all have bad days. Yeah, exactly. But in the wheel route he ran, I think it was Andy Dalton that threw the ball. It was gorgeous. It was over the shoulder, perfect catch. And he said that he's been working on it, like off to the side. He didn't want anyone to be watching just in case he messed up. That's why I enjoy talking to Tony because he's a funny guy. But yeah, and I think that he can catch the ball. I think it's a confidence thing and it's a concentration thing. Tony has struck me as a guy who, when he's confident, when he believes in himself, he can get it done. But that confidence isn't always there. It does get shaken. And if he can continue his run like he did last year, I could see him making that. But I'm still on the Divine Zigbo train. I think that there's a lot there. I think there's a lot to like there.
The gun show, huh?
Yes. Not just because he has gigantic biceps, although Whew. No, the way he catches the ball just opens up so much for you if he has to get in the game. And I think that the thing we're really we haven't really talked about is special teams. And, I think that if we're trying to rank it on special teams, probably Divine and Abram would be the best special teams options in terms of what they can do, just athletically, their athletic profiles. Malcolm Brown has been working on special teams. Tony Jones Jr. has been working on special teams too, but I just don't see them impacting that unit as much as the other guys. So if it comes down to that, I think you're going between those two. And I honestly disagree. I think that you could cut Tony and not feel too bad about it. I think the upside with Abram is really exciting. And it's not about whether he can be, to me, a successful NFL running back. It's whether he can do it now. I think that he's maybe a year away from really contending for a role. And I just don't think you want to give up on him. So that's, if you're trying to make an argument for Abram, I think that's it. Where
so you think he can make the 53?
I think he could. I think he has to show that ability, that kind of between the tackles, early down running ability that the Saints need and that they can rely on. And if he can do that, I think that he has a really good chance to make it. If he struggles, if he shows that he's maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 2 years from being 2 years away, then I think Divine is the next guy on that list. And I think that his skill set is going to shine in the preseason.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest key. It's almost like really for the running back competition, you need to see them against opponents. What you see in camp, you can see some physicality, and like you mentioned before, some of the things with vision and be able to the cutting ability, but that more physicality and being able to either out juke or run over people is going to be more prevalent in the preseason than we're seeing right now in these practices.
You realize we just managed to talk for like 22 minutes about a guy who might not get 22 carries his entire season?
But it's still an important position.
Dedication.
Yeah.
That's what you get on Inside Black and Gold. And when we come back, we're going to talk about another dedicated 22 in CJ Gardner-Johnson. Stick around.
Cue the music.
I've been like on fire with segues, and I'm just going to keep rolling. I'm going to keep rolling until they kick me out. All right, we're back. We're triple digits on this live video, and I'm always honored that this many people want to hang out with us and listen to us just bullshit. Oh, am I not allowed to swear? It's a podcast. The FCC has no power here.
There is no bleeps.
But yeah, no. Again, I appreciate it. We're gonna do one more segment. We're gonna get into CJ Gardner-Johnson, the great debate. And then throw your questions in. We're going to do a live mailbag at the end, get into some of that. And we're going to put that up as a separate episode later in the week. But okay. Y'all ready? Y'all ready for the question? We're going to get it. Someone said, change the topic. We're changing it. Cooley YB. I think we lost him. We lost him with that 22 minutes on the running backs that aren't going to play. Crazy. Hey, listen to the Saints podcast. What are you here for? You're here for that. Anyway,
Wait till they get to the game, Saturday night, and we're in the third quarter.
Right. We're in the preseason. We're talking about the Alvin Kamara is not going to play. You want to watch that game? That's what you should be watching
in the preseason.
Right. Like that's if you're going to sit there and watch an entire preseason football game, you better care about the third string running back because that's what you're going to see. But all right, let's get going. All right, I gotta get into character. All right.
When you turn that hat, it's like a switch.
I didn't turn the hat, but I will. Let's see. Yeah, reverse hat. It's getting me going. Okay. And we're back. The final segment here on Inside Black and Gold. Make sure to mash that subscribe button. Rate us 5 stars. Give us a review. And honestly, even if you don't rate 5 stars, if you rate 4 stars, if you rate 3 stars, just tell me why. That's the only thing I ask. If
you need answers
for some reason, tell me what it is, and we'll try to fix it. That's the only thing that bothers me about the review system is if you don't rate it 5, something happened that you want an answer for and you want to change, but I don't know what it is, so I can't help you. So help me help you. Give us a rating, give us a review. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll try to be better. I want to be better. A guy who doesn't think he needs to be better is the top slot corner in the NFL by his own admission, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. We've had some interesting developments with him as of late. He is, I guess the only way to describe it is holding in. He reported to camp, but he is, quote unquote, limiting his action in camp as he tries to work toward a new contract. The new development is that he is not with the team. We talked to DA about it today on Saturday at camp. I keep saying today, even though it's going to be confusing. I'm going to have to cut that out. We talked to DA on Saturday about where he is. He said that it is not injury related. It is not contract related. It is something family related. And he has been excused from practice, but he will be back on Monday. Take that for what it is. I don't know. It seems like a pretty crazy coincidence that a guy who's not practicing because he's trying to get a new contract is suddenly not with the team and has nothing to do with that. But
how do you question somebody though when the family matter gets brought up and the team is behind it saying that you can't it's hard to question that because then you become the asshole.
Yeah, I'm not going to question it, but I'm also probably not going to believe it. If he's probably dealing with something and it really doesn't matter whether he's out for the contract or out for something else, but we'll find out on Monday if he's back and he's working, then hey, whatever. But it doesn't sound like he's still working toward that deal. And so the question we are asking, should the Saints break the bank for C.J. Gardner-Johnson at slot corner? And it's an interesting question because, you're talking about paying top dollar for a specialized position, right? This is not a guy who's going to play deep safety. This is not a guy who's going to play on the outside. This is a guy who plays exclusively in the slot. And so are you going to pay, $15 million a season for that position? I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I just think from a dollars and cents perspective, from a team that's trying to sort out its cap table a little better than it has in the past, I think that's a tough sell.
Is that the going rate for the top slot corner? 12?
It's tough because it's not a position that's like you can go through the cornerback, pay scale, and you can go through the safety pay scale, but there just aren't that many like pure slot corners in the NFL. So you're kind of trying to figure it out. And so I think it's going to be the Jimmy Graham debate, right? Remember Jimmy Graham wanted to be paid like a wide receiver, but he's a tight end. So he's getting paid on that scale. I think you're going to end up with the same situation where CJ is going to want to be paid like a top outside corner. And it's just, he doesn't play outside corner. So I just don't know where the value is, but I do know that CJ is incredibly important to this team and you want to keep him there. I just don't think that, the way they extended Marshawn last year, they didn't make him play on that final year of his contract. And I think that's the question right now, because you're going to have to pay CJ at a level that is going to convince him that he shouldn't test the free agent market.
The one big thing the Saints have going against them in this, and I know they really don't care, but I don't think you're going to find a single Saints fan that says oh, we don't need CJ Gardner Johnson, don't pay him. I would think that there's going to be 100%. The fans want this guy back. Just pay the guy whatever he wants to keep him around. And it's not just because of obviously what he does for you on the field with his play. It's more about the swagger, the attitude, the trash talking, even though he wanted to downplay that part of it when we were talking to him in the the OTAs or mini camp session, whatever it was, when he wanted to, mention that you're not mentioning me amongst the top slot corners in the NFL. It's all about being the instigator, the agitator, but that is a huge part of his game that throws the opposition off and is part of the key. And I think one of the best images from last year was him all up in Tom Brady's face in the field, with his arms shrugged and just kind of like saying, what you got, Tom? And it's just that mentality and that attitude that I think that all the Saints fans obviously cherish. And he's a key part to the team. But I like you're mentioning, he's a specialized guy in the fact that there's so much depth and versatility at that secondary position. I joked with it a few times that if you have a hard time in a Madden or a video game trying to construct a better secondary than the Saints team really has this year.
No, and I've said this all throughout camp. This is the best secondary that I can remember the Saints having. You can go back and maybe put it up against some others. I wasn't here for that, so I can't speak to it. But since I've been aware of kind of the Saints secondaries, I don't recall seeing one this dominant and this deep, for where you have, you have an argument that you have the top cornerback in the NFL. There's an argument that you're never going to get a real answer, but the fact that you can make the argument in terms of Marshawn Lattimore, and that's all you have to say. Like, you have arguably the top cornerback in the NFL. The saying is like, he's top 2, but he's not 2. That sort of thing. And the evidence bears it out. And he shows up in the primetime matchups. He locks up the star corners, and that's what you have on the outside. On the other side, you have a guy in Paulson Adebo who is coming into his own in year 2. Really impressive. I have questions about whether he can be as physical as he's been once flags start flying. And I think he's going to have to scale it back a little bit, but you want him to be physical and rein it in. You don't want him to be playing scared. And the fact is, physicality is allowed in big games, and like once you get to the more serious games, that's when the physicality gets let go a little bit more. And that's where you want to win games. And I'm perfectly okay with him making receivers feel him downfield. You have a premium draft pick spent on a rookie second round pick. And that's where I think you start to weigh the equation of, you didn't bring in Alontae Taylor just as a special teamer. And I know that was kind of the thing early on of, they brought him in because they love him on special teams. Well,
not
they do love him
round pick.
But right? I think that you make that pick because you see a future where you might not be able to retain CJ.
Sure.
And they also extended Bradley Roby, who got a lot of work in the slot last year when CJ was hurt.
And that's exactly, if you have an issue where all of a sudden you don't have a CJ, I totally would have Roby in the slot easily.
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't think that Roby profiles as a slot corner. I think that he's an outside corner. And I think Alontae is probably the guy that you want to throw in the slot. But either way, you're setting up a scenario where
Lattimore, Adebo, and Roby out there together.
Well, I think Roby would be the CB3, and you'd want to put Alontae in the slot. But right now, you don't have to worry about that, and you want Alontae to be able to play on the outside. And that's where the positional specificity of CJ comes into play, right? If you think that Alontae can be a stud slot corner, and also go outside and play outside if you need it, then I think that's where you want a guy like that to be. Whereas if you're paying top dollar for CJ, you know that he's going to play in the slot and he's not going to go outside. And this is a team that really likes to move pieces around. And that's where I see
that earlier.
That's where I see that the difficulty being when you're trying to convince yourself, okay, we should pay $15 million a season for this guy. But I do think that CJ is vitally important to this defense. So I think you have to try. I think you have to try to pay him. And it's going to be a question of whether the team is able to offer a deal that makes CJ say, you know what, this is enough and I want to be here. But I don't think that you can break the bank.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some contracts of some quote unquote slot corners. And I'm just seeing Mike Hilton here, 4 years, $24 million.
But I mean, Mike Hilton is nowhere near the level of CJ. A Chris Harris would be a good example. He was one of the top slot corners. He signed a 2-year, $17 million deal in 2020.
Okay.
His contract before that was 1 year, $12 million. He had a 5-year, $42 million. But these are old contracts, so the scale's going up. So I mean, I think you're looking at somewhere between 10 to 15 annually in terms of what you're paying. And I think the Saints cap table is getting a little more manageable, so I think you can start to massage it a little bit. And we've seen the Saints be able to create the space when they need to. It's just a question of whether they feel like they need to.
Yeah, and it's hard to see a guy. It would be hard to see a guy like Gardner Johnson all of a sudden, obviously on the other side because of that passion, that energy, and just the overall skill he's bringing to the defense. And you even brought up last season. I loved your tweet, and I blame you, I think, for CJ Gardner Johnson deciding to hold out, for pointing out that the Saints lost every single game that he didn't play in last year.
They sure did.
I think he brought that immediately to his agent and said, yo, and brought it to the Saints. Because he retweeted you too.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Almost immediately. It was like within 10 minutes. Oh, I always appreciate that. And I feel like if I ran into Mickey Loomis in the hallway, he'd slap me.
Right, exactly, like a little trip or something.
But it's it is evidence. I mean, if you're trying to convince this team that you need me, you need to pay me. You don't really have to go much deeper than that. I mean, obviously there are stats you can look at. There's, the fact that he's intercepted Tom Brady twice last season. The fact that, he's always there, always being a pest, always locking people up. Outside of Chris Godwin ate his lunch a little bit. But outside of that, I don't think he got cooked by nearly anybody. And yeah, you look at it, it's like, hey, this team went 9-8 last year. In the games I played in, we were 9-3. And those games were obviously the games they lost were the Panthers week 2. He didn't play. And one of those losses was the Falcons game. He didn't play in the second half. So realistically, you could say they were 9-2, because he didn't play in the second half. But you give him the 3 there. So it's the Falcons game that they lost. Then the games he didn't play in were Eagles, Bills, Cowboys, and
I'm trying to think.
Titans. Eagles, Bills, Cowboys, and Titans. Now, the counter argument to that is, do the Saints win those games even if he's there? And I don't think they do. I think they probably beat the Falcons if he plays in the second half. I think that was an impact for that game, definitely. I think that they maybe beat the Titans because that was a very close game. One key player being out might have swung the result. The Eagles game, no. The Bills game, no. Cowboys game, maybe.
That's so
week
hard
2,
though, just because what if he was able
in that matchup
to cause a turnover in the Eagles game and that completely flipped everything? I mean, I know that's
the fact is Trevor Siemian was not winning that game.
No faith in Siemian against
that game. I watched it. But week 2, you're telling me CJ being there, all of a sudden the offensive line can block? No. I mean, so it's a stat, but it's a stat he will use, I guarantee it. But it's not nearly as I think the points per game is more telling, which I think they allowed, twice as many points per game in the games he was out. So that's a number. And I don't think we even need to go that deep. I think we can all watch these games and see his impact and see not just the action he's providing on the field, but the energy he's providing on the field, and the energy he's sopping away from the other team by just taking them completely off their game.
And that's a great point. And that energy obviously fuels the rest of the team too. They feed off of that.
Yeah. And I think that him, and I appreciate the way he's going about this, because he could have held out, right? He chose not to, and he chose to show up and show that he is dedicated to the team. Like, he is invested in this team. Otherwise, he didn't have to show up. He could have held out. It would have cost him some money. But he showed up. He showed that he's here. He intercepted Jameis. and then he kind of went into cooling tent, said, hey, okay, you saw what I got. And he wants this team to be successful. He wants to be here, and he wants to get paid while he's doing it. And, if you can find a way to do it, I do it. The question is, would you break the bank to keep CJ? And I've told you all the reasons why you shouldn't.
I mean, so breaking the bank is $12 million a year.
Yes, to me 12 to 15 million annually, 3-year deal. So you're talking 3 years, 38, give or take. I'm doing it. I
mean, sure, if you just
write the checks,
we're writing the checks for the team. But I mean, there's a lot of people that they obviously have to extend. And for me, I would want to go for the center, Eric McCoy, before I would lock up CJ currently. I think that I would like to get a deal done with McCoy before the getting into this season, just to get him hammered in.
I think, the one thing we didn't mention is, one of the issues of extending CJ now is, I think there's still a lot of questions of, where the ceiling is of this team. And you want to commit to it, and you want to say this team can win as it's structured. But until you see it happen, there is some doubt there. And there is some doubt in, Jameis as a long-term option. Whether you believe in him, whether you don't, we haven't gotten a chance to see him for an entire season. And there's still a lot he needs to show. And committing to a major new contract before this season is tough. But if you don't, and it comes at the expense of a guy who is usually working for you, and now this mental ninja is disgruntled in the locker room and unhappy and not being his normal self. And I think that he could have just as negative effect if you do him dirty and you don't give him the respect he has earned. And I don't want to deal with that. And if it's just a deal of like, hey, we don't want to be restructuring all these contracts every year, but we can, and that's what we have to do to make sure we can pay CJ, then you do it. Just do it.
See, as brash and outspoken as he is, I don't know if he would be that problem for the team in the locker room. You know what I mean? I don't.
Not if he's making money.
Yeah, I think even if there's going to be that ongoing strife between the teams while trying to get something done, I don't think he's going to be happy talking to us, but I don't think he's going to be an issue on the field for his performance or in the locker room with his teammates.
I don't know. But as T Dirty 00 puts it, Loomis moves money around like a U-Haul, and not wrong. Let's go through here. I'm not, we're going to get to some of the questions in the final segment, but let's just go through what some of the people are saying. So yeah, 33 years, 30 million. Yeah, somewhere in that range. You're going 10 mil plus. I don't think you need to go top end cornerback range, but I think you're going 10 mil plus, and I think that's fair. Yeah, and every year the cap goes up a little bit, so it helps you in that regard. But it's a question of whether you're capping it this year, and that's just what you got to figure out.
You got Roby coming up at the end of his deal as well, too, right?
Well, they extended him, so that's a question. And I think you can. That's the thing. I think that the Saints are playing. The Saints don't want to extend him. I think the Saints would be willing to pay him in free agency, but they don't want to negotiate against themselves, which is what you would have to do to extend him before the season, because he's going to tell you what his value is, because he knows what he thinks his value is. He's the top slot corner in the NFL. He's going to tell you that. He's going to tell you this is what the top slot corner in the NFL is going to get paid, and this is what you're going to pay me. And the Saints are going to be like, but I don't think that's what your market is. I don't think that you're going to hit free agency and you're going to get this deal you're looking for. And so that's the negotiating kind of landlock you are in. And the Saints are probably going to have to pay more than they think they have to. And they're going to have to do it now. And they're going to have to commit money that might be, poorly allocated down the road if things don't go the way if things don't hit the ceiling you want. And that's the question. But I said, I'm negotiating against myself. I'm paying the guy if I hold the purse strings. What are you doing?
I mean, I would love to retain him, obviously, but that $10 million even a year just seems pretty steep. I love his ball skills. I love the attitude, but as not a guy that's not going to be playing outside, I don't know if I can be paying him $12 million a year.
Well, and here's if we're breaking the bank, so we got Millie 2L chimes in $22 million a year. If that's the number, if that's what you're going for, no way in hell. I'm sorry. I love CJ. I think CJ is a great player. You're not paying again. We're not talking about an outside corner. You're not talking about a guy who can move around. You are talking about a slot corner, and you are not paying that guy $22 million a year. There's no way. Even if he is the top slot corner, I don't think the top slot corner makes that much. But that's where I'm landing.
See, you mentioned him hitting free agency, and that there could be that danger too, obviously, of a team becoming so enamored with the personality and what they've seen from him and how he can sway games with his trash talk, with his instigating, and brings that kind of mentality and attitude, boosting the rest of the team around him. I could see someone actually willing to overspend on him. I just don't know if the Saints team can.
Yeah, there's always someone willing to pay too much.
Right.
It's always the Jaguars. But that's the thing. I don't think CJ wants to end up in a bad situation, right? And that's what the Saints are going to argue. Like,
well, I guess that's everybody. Do you want to get paid or do you want to stick with a good team?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what the Saints always argue. That's why they never pay wide receivers.
Although I thought Trey Hendrickson, I was like, there's no way he's not going to have success in Cincinnati, and look what happened.
Well, he balled out. He had 13 sacks that final season, and that's where you end up. And
for some reason, he was never able to stay healthy here, though.
I mean, the Saints let Trey walk. Saints let Marcus Williams walk, and that's this kind of the era we're in the NFL is guys don't want to play out that final season, and I don't blame them because you take that knee and you blow it up, and suddenly that $10 million, that $12 million is gone, and that's always the difficult part. But Steve, I need you to answer: 12 to 15 million. Are you paying CJ like 3 years, $38 million?
I just no, because I think there's other. I have depth enough at this.
You can say no. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not going to get mad.
No, I'm just
CJ
saying
might.
that I know he will. He's going to hate this. I'm sure he's listening right now. He's tuned in. But I just think that there's so much other places like along the defensive line and the offensive line where I need to lock some guys up. And I mentioned McCoy. He's definitely someone I would want to extend before this season, before I'm thinking about Gardner Johnson at this time because of the depth, the versatility in that secondary.
Yeah, and when we're going to go back and like that draft, Saints didn't have a first round pick. The fact that we are talking about Eric McCoy and CJ Gardner Johnson and how much you're going to have to pay them, what a great draft. I mean,
it's a bit solid.
They didn't have a first round pick, and they still found these gems. And that's a good problem to have. So hopefully this all gets sorted out. I think that's where we'll leave it on this episode of Inside Black and Gold. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to let us know what you think of the show. Follow Steve on Twitter at Steve Geller WWL. Follow myself, yours truly, at Jeff_Nowak. Check out WWL.com, AM, FM, and the Odyssey app for the latest. Thanks, y'all.
Saturday pregame show, 3:00, WWL.
There it is. Okay. now that we've done that, as we said, we are coming back for a mailbag. So
Spicy.
stick around. We're going to lead back into it. I know that was probably confusing for anyone who didn't know that we were staying, but that's like the secret mailbag. You've made it to the super secret extra level of
like
tonight's podcast.
There you go. An Easter egg mailbag.
Yes. Okay. So there's some good questions in here. I'm kind of excited about this. And if you have any more, throw it in there. We're going to try to get, I don't know. We're going to try to do 20 minutes. It is getting late, so we can only be on here so long. I know Steve has kids.
He's out at a pizza party right now. I'm good.
Oh, we got pizza party night. We can record all night. This is where the bourbon starts. Should I go get a glass of bourbon?
Absolutely. I could use a refill.
Have you been drinking? We're going to go to commercial. I'm going to get some bourbon, then we're going to come answer some questions.
There you go.
All right. All right. We're back.
We are back. Had to get a refill too.
All right. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. Remember to toss your comments, questions in the chat, and we're going to get to them. Hopefully we can get this answered before my buzz kicks in too much. But all right.
Everything's better with a little buzz.
All right, Steve, I'm gonna lead in this one because you get to always do the fun ones. All right. Welcome in to this special edition, this live bourbon mailbag of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, WWL digital sports producer, alongside WWL Saint Sideline reporter Steve Geller. And we wanted to we found we had a lot of questions that we wanted to get answered. So we wanted to do a live mailbag. We've been streaming, and we've collected all of these questions on YouTube. So we're gonna answer them as we go down, kind of a live fire exercise. And we've only been drinking a little bit, but we're gonna let it happen. Jerry over here, we're back. He's always excited. I love this guy. He's here every night. Every time we stream, he's right here. He's always got something to say. He's always really nice to me, and I appreciate that.
I was gonna say, definitely appreciate it.
Smash that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. 5 stars. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. I really do appreciate reviews. I can't say enough how helpful it is, because we're doing this podcast. We don't know what it is that we don't know. We don't know if we're doing stuff that's annoying you. We don't know if we're doing stuff that you like, that you want to get more of. So if there is that, and you want to let us know, or you want us to fix something, if you think my voice is annoying, I don't know what I could do about that, but I'll try.
They're just going to click off.
Leave a comment, leave a review. And without further ado, let's go to my first question, which I find really kind of funny. Is where was it? I had it. Oh, there it is. Would y'all send a 504 company? Would y'all send the Jets a 6th or a 7th rounder for Quan? Now, if the Saints wanted Quan Alexander, they would have signed Quan Alexander. I mean, they had every opportunity. They chose not to. And I don't know.
Maybe they just waited too long and now they're doubting themselves, so they're going to package some picks over to the Jets.
Yeah, I think maybe they were trying to wait it out, and maybe they thought he would just still be there, but I don't think they're gonna. They've already traded for Quan once. I don't think they're gonna do it again. I don't know if I've ever seen the team trade for the same player twice.
That'd be
I think that might be a first in the NFL. I don't know if that's ever happened. But I will say no. I do not think the Saints would send a draft pick to the Jets, who just signed Quan. They want him for Quan Alexander. I don't see it.
The Jets did let DeMario Davis go twice, but one was free agency, and obviously they had drafted him.
Yeah, but they didn't trade for him.
No, but I'm just saying they let him go twice, which is ridiculous to me.
Yeah. And I like Quan. I don't understand why Quan keeps getting into the offseason without a contract. It's so strange. But
I think everybody's obviously just is concerned with his history of injuries, and he's not going to last you an entire season. And the fact that
he lasted, he was pretty durable last year. He went into the offseason healthy.
His performance on the field, maybe it gets too much credit then for where it actually is, I think. And
you think so?
Yeah, and I definitely think he's another great voice for the locker room. Obviously, part of that Juice Boys,
legendary,
able to hype up guys. And I was really amazed when he came to this team. It was like immediately it seemed like there was this bond already with him. Like so many guys, I don't want to say followed, but they definitely kind of looked up to him.
Yeah, I think that, if you wanted to make an argument for why the Saints should have brought him back, it's because he and DeMario Davis vibe as well as any two linebackers can vibe. And this is a team that plays, 93% of its snaps out of the nickel.
When DeMario
you want to get CJ on the field.
When DeMario had that reference of "Dude, where's my car?" with Quan Alexander, that was the be-all, end-all right there.
They should have got the tattoos. That would have been funny. But this is a team that plays a majority of its snaps, a vast majority of its snap out of the nickel. So, you only need two linebackers. And I understand why you wanted to get Pete Werner on the field and you wanted to give him that opportunity. And then I think that's what it ultimately you don't want to bring Quan back. And maybe this is what led Quan to not sign to want to go elsewhere. Is I don't think you want to bring Quan back and say you're backing up Pete Werner. I don't think that's what Quan wants to do at this point in his career, and that might have been the hurdle.
Nobody was knocking down the door either. Obviously for Quan Alexander
or Kiko Alonso, apparently, who showed up for one day, looked like Thor, and then retired like that. Thor.
I'm done with this. I'd never play football again.
I thought that was a good joke. You didn't laugh at it. He's like, I need to go back and
to Asgard.
Yes, play Fortnite, drink beer. Fortnite, not our sponsor.
We did comment on too. It was odd seeing him in the same number as Alex Anzalone and having that hair flowing out the helmet. But now that's gone too. We don't have another Thor in the linebacking core.
It was disappointing. He was even wearing 47. It was Kismet. But moving on. No, I do not think the Saints are going to trade for Quan Alexander after trading for him once and then not signing him.
Hey, there's a chance. Hey, what if he doesn't make the Jets roster even?
You're drunk, Steve.
Okay,
moving on. We only have so much time. We can't infinitely talk about Quan Alexander. We got to move on. We have other questions.
It's possible he doesn't even make the Jets.
Yeah, you keep saying that, but we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about Murtis Lockett. She has a question.
Okay.
She even tagged it. She even put a header in there. It says mailbag question. What a champ. Could Taysom Hill be the Saints MVP at the end of the season if he remains healthy? Yes, he could be. And the reason is we have not seen Taysom in this do-it-all role since 2018? Since he was blocking a punt, running for a touchdown, catching a touchdown against the Falcons on Thanksgiving. That's really the last time we saw do-it-all Taysom, when he came in against the Vikings and was the unstoppable player in the playoffs. And then they gave Drew Brees the ball and he fumbled immediately. That's the last time we saw Taysom Hill in this Swiss Army knife role. And I'm excited about it. I think that's what really got me excited about Taysom Hill. It wasn't him being a quarterback. I understand why he wanted to get his shot. I understand why Sean felt obligated to give him that opportunity, but that is just not what makes Taysom special. And what makes Taysom special is doing things that you can't defend and making the defense uncomfortable at all times. And if he's healthy and he's able to get through the season, yes, he could be he could score 10 to 12 touchdowns in the right circumstances. I think he is going to be a player that we're talking about by the end of the season as a fantasy dynamo because he's scoring week after week after week. You know, he's not going to put up the crazy yardage numbers, but he's gonna vulture touchdowns like an animal. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully he can get back on the field.
I feel like we're turning into a Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp or whoever kind of show because you're like on the whole positive end of the spectrum here.
I'm a positive guy.
And I guess I'm taking more of the negative approach because I'm more concerned about the age and the injury history of Taysom. We just got him back from the Liz Frank injury and everyone was happy for the start of camp. And then boom, the next day we found out he's got a rib injury. And it's great seeing him working off to the side, but another guy that I'm kind of I wanted to see him in action in training camp and back in this Swiss Army knife role, back as this contributor on special teams and not with the red practice jersey on, focusing on quarterback. But yeah, the injury history, that's the big one right there. If he remains healthy is the huge question mark right there, just because of what we've seen with him at the past. And we know even his had a history of concussions as well. Hopefully, he can stay on the field this year. I'm not obviously wishing anything against Taysom. I just worry about a 32-year-old being able to last in this league, considering the injury history he's had already. And we didn't even get started, and he already busted his ribs.
Yes, but again, as I pointed out, I think that was more about Taysom.
What?
I genuinely think what happened with this rib injury is Taysom forgot that he's allowed to get hit now, right? And
we weren't even in full pads.
But if they were wearing pads, he wouldn't have got a rib injury because his ribs would have been protected by the pads. That's what I'm saying. I think he'll be fine. I'm more worried about his foot. I'm worried about his head. His ribs, he only needs, you have so many. You don't need them all. I just think that Taysom Hill, when used in the correct way, when used in the way that he was initially deployed by the Saints, is an unstoppable force. And if you're going to do it the right way, and the question was, can he be the Saints MVP? And I'm telling you, if Taysom Hill, has 500 yards receiving, 200, 300 yards rushing and scores 8-9 touchdowns, which I think is reasonable if he's deployed in the way that he should be deployed, which is, QB power in the red zone. Just a guy who's going to get rushing attempts. He's going to line up in the backfield. He's going to line up all over the formation, play 17 games, maybe, 15 probably. He's going to get hurt at some point. He always does. I think
you could put him in it.
I'm not saying he necessarily will be
pump block, field goal block. Obviously, can
right. And you're also talking about the 8-9 touchdowns might be unrealistic, but I'm saying like he's going to get touchdowns.
I don't think that 8-9 is unrealistic at all for Taysom. Back in that role of being the Swiss Army knife, especially that
and if he
QB
blocks
power
punts,
in the red zone is almost unstoppable.
I love Taysom, and I've always been a huge fan of Taysom. I never wanted him to be the starting quarterback. But I'm just such a huge fan of like how hard he plays and the fact that he's willing to do anything. And, so that's to me, most valuable player. We're not talking about the best player in the world. We're talking about the most valuable player. I think he could be that. Okay. You disagree and that's fine. You're wrong. We'll move on.
Next.
Okay. This isn't really a question. Well, I guess it is a question. My wide receiver lineup, this is Jerry, the OG, Poré Jr. His wide receiver lineup, Thomas, wide receiver 1, Olave, wide receiver 2, Landry, wide receiver 3, Deontay Hardy, wide receiver 4, Marquez Callaway, wide receiver 5, Aesop Winston Jr., wide receiver 6. Your thoughts? I'm curious, what about Aesop, cousin Winston, has gotten you excited? I think he has some special teams potential. I think he's a decent returner, but the Saints brought in a special teams ace to back up Deontay Hardy, who I think they probably don't want to pay. We were talking about CJ. I think Deontay is a guy they probably don't pay. So I don't know about Aesop. What do you think, Steve?
Immediately to me, I actually would have Traquan ahead of Callaway.
And Traquan's not on Jerry's list.
No, and surprisingly, he is on mine because I've been a Traquan doubter, I guess, just because of his injury history and the lack of consistency we've seen from him when he has played. But I got to give it to him. I think he's had a pretty decent camp so far, and right now, I would say he would be my wide receiver 4 ahead of Callaway. But other than that,
I understand. Like, I think Aesop has the familiarity element, but I'm putting Traquan ahead of him. I think Traquan, no one wants to talk about it, but he's had a very good camp, and he does things that other wide receivers don't want to do or don't excel at, which is block.
That dirty work for sure.
We talk about the receiving, we talk about all this, but the receiver's got to block too, and he does it as well as anybody, and that's more than any other reason. That's why he's on the roster. We talked to him, or I talked to him like a few days ago, maybe it was last week, and I asked him, like, what is your goal? What is your biggest goal this camp? And he's like, they get through it healthy, right? And I think that was a great answer, and it's true. Like, he recognizes this. He has not been healthy, and I think if he gets through it healthy, he's going to be on that list right behind Callaway. If we're going in on, I haven't seen anything from Aesop that's gotten me really excited. The guys who I've seen stuff from that I've been excited about, Kirk Merritt,
definitely
been really good, and I don't know if he's going to make this roster, but I think he's going to make an NFL roster. I think he would have made this roster last year if he was competing in camp last year. He's making that team because he's been that good.
Yeah, I agree with you with the fact that though it's really tough with this roster, obviously, just because those offseason additions really changed the whole makeup of this wide receiving core.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Marquez has not impressed me. I think that if I had to pick a guy who was disappointing in camp, it would be Marquez in it because I expected him to take a step forward, and he just can't get separation. And it's something we saw last year, and he makes some incredible catches, but I think it's because he has to make those incredible catches. Another guy, Dejon Dixon, I've been impressed with. I think he's going to be a solid player. And then, I think that was it. Yeah, Traquan, Dejon Dixon, and Kirk Merritt all have an argument to go ahead of Aesop. So I don't think he's the guy.
Yeah, you were mentioning with Callaway, and for me too, I've seen the physicality, the ability to high point the football, but there's still not that separation issue, which was obviously a problem last year. That just I don't know how you work on that either.
Yeah,
how do you get better separation?
I thought this comment was funny from T Dirty. He's got jokes. T Dirty's got jokes. He says Traquan is on my list, my shit list. Yeah, we just threw that out there.
I get it. I understand totally, but he can't ignore what he's done for it on the field so far.
And I think Traquan gets a bad rap because it's like he's hurt all the time, but it's not an effort thing. He's working, he's trying, and he's had big games. I think that's why I'm more susceptible to Traquan hype than some others, because I think that he's had a low-key big number of big games. Like there's a lot of Saints players out there that you have high expectations for, but haven't really done anything to solidify them. Trey has had a 10-catch game. Trey had a monster game against the Eagles his rookie season. Trey had a big game against Washington. He caught that long touchdown from Breeze that set the record. Trey had a monster game in week 4 of the 2020 season against the Lions. Remember, everyone was out. Both cornerbacks were out. The Saints were down 14-0. I think Breeze threw a pick 6 or an interception on the first drive. And Traquan is the guy who sealed that game. He got 2 touchdowns. He got a massive third down conversion late in the game. And he had a big game in week 17 last year, or week 18 last year, when the Saints needed to win that game. We can let it go because they didn't make the playoffs, but that was a must-win game, right? But the Saints didn't know that they weren't going to make the playoffs when they were playing it. So that was a huge game in that moment. And, for a while, it looked like they were going to make the playoffs. and he had a big game. He had an incredible touchdown catch in that game. So, I think that Trey has, if he can be healthy, right? If he can get through training camp healthy, I think he has a spot on the roster.
And I mean, we just did this with Taysom Hill, and that's obviously the big question. That if you can stay healthy, and obviously, definitely more than with Taysom Hill, we've seen that inability with Traquan Smith. The bigger problem, another big problem though, was the fact that when he did play, you mentioned the big games, but there was also times he just disappeared and had maybe a catch or two in the contest.
Yeah. And Jay Black here, he makes a good point, which is give a rookie a chance, which is, that's why I agree with that. I think that there is merit in getting somebody on your roster, a young player. And I know I said merit, and that's the guy that I think if you're trying to give a rookie a chance, give a young guy a chance, it's Kirk Merritt. And that was a pun that didn't work, but hey, I think it works to some extent. We have one more question here that I wanted to get to, which is he doesn't like Trey. And that's fine. That's fine. I can't find it, but someone said the writing's on the wall for Deontay, which is essentially they're saying that Rashid Shaheed, that's the guy you're trying to think of. He is the guy at Weber State. He's been trying to get healthy and get on the field. But I do think that that is warranted. When you're talking about Deontay, you're talking about a returner. You're talking about a guy who has been very valuable, but has been hurt in a lot of key moments.
And his return numbers were down last year.
Yeah, and you have to, and it's like you want to get him on the field, but you also need to constantly be, taking care of his snap totals, taking care of his durability, and he's going to want to get paid. And I just don't know if that position is valuable enough where you pay it, and that's why you bring in a Rashid Shaheed, who I don't think he's going to, he might be stashed on the practice squad, but that's planning for the eventuality that Deontay's out of town.
That's hard for me to stomach right now, just because we haven't even seen the guy practice. I mean, we've seen more from special teams from Aesop Winston Jr. than I have from Rashid Shaheed.
I recommend that anybody who does not know about Rashid Shaheed goes and looks at his college tape, because the guy is a stud returner. I mean, he's incredible. And like, you bring him in for a reason. And I mean, I don't know if he's going to do anything in the NFL, but I trust the Saints' ability to go find a returner. I mean, they're pretty good at it.
I'm just saying, like, to say that he's replacing Hardy right now is it's just hard for me to do, just because I have seen nothing at practice right now.
Oh no, yeah, I'm not saying he's going to replace Deontay this year. I'm just saying when you get into the offseason and you're talking about, okay, how much are we willing to pay Deontay? I think you're going to find out that at a certain point it is tough to pay a returner in a league where you really don't return that many kicks.
Yeah, and it's not the fact that he's been good, but he hasn't been like Devin Hester returning balls constantly to the house. Obviously, his rookie year, he earned All-Pro honors. Last season, though, was just okay. It wasn't anything impressive, but that was the entire team last year as well. There wasn't anything standing out anywhere.
No. And, we kind of got off the rails there, but no, I think that I would, to answer the question, my thoughts are that Aesop Winston is not the guy that you're going to see make that final roster spot. But we'll have to see. We're going to learn on the preseason.
That's a good question too, is though, how many receivers are they going to keep?
I think they're going to keep 6. That's
my, I think
there's 5 receivers that you have to keep and 1 receiver that you got to make a decision on. But let's move on. We have a question. What's the feeling around linebacker DeMarco Jackson? His injury is undisclosed, but does it feel like it's a significant injury? Is it an injury at all? I think he's dealing with an injury. A lot of guys didn't practice on Saturday. It was the first day or the last day before day off, and I think you're trying to find a way to keep people 2 days off so they can kind of recover. Like Zach Bond wasn't dealing with an injury, but he wasn't out there. Then there were guys like, Smoke Monday, Kiko Alonso. They were not out there, and they're not going to come back. Jaleel Johnson also went on IR, so he's not going to come back. But I think DeMarco, it is concerning anytime you see a rookie, especially, a 5th-round pick who's not guaranteed to make the roster. You've seen the Saints draft a guy and cut them before. And, so I think he will make the roster. I think that they took him in the 5th round because they have faith in him. But yeah, I mean, the longer he's out, 3 days isn't anything major. Peyton Turner missed 2 days in week 2, and then he came back and wasn't the worst for wear. So I think you're just kind of playing it safe with guys. What I've seen from this new training staff is they are not afraid to just pull a guy out of practice. They are not going to send somebody out there that they don't think is healthy, or that they don't think is in the right condition, or that they don't think is ready to practice. We've seen it with Marcus Davenport. We heard from Mickey the day before camp started that Marcus's only issue is conditioning. It's been 2 weeks. Still haven't seen it.
There's definitely, I don't know if it's a different NFL or just the Saints, but I feel like it's a different NFL where it's more about taking the time with players to getting them back to where they're close as you can be to 100%. Because I know it's hard to say anyone's ever 100% in the league, but the old mentality of trying to get guys back as quickly as possible, if you're tough enough or man enough to get back on the field, that's not the case anymore.
No, and I still think that DeMarco, he's been working with the second and third team. He's been working alongside the Caden Ellis's of the world, and I'm blanking. Who's the other linebacker?
For who? For
hold on, I need to pull up the Saints roster here. I'm trying to. I was talking about somebody. Andrew Dowell. Andrew Dowell. He's been working alongside Andrew Dowell. So DeMarco's been working at the mic. Andrew has been working at the will, and so I think that they're pairing him with Andrew Dowell, and I think that's telling because Andrew has always been the special teams guy since he's been here. He's been the guy who makes an impact in that role, and I think that they're having him follow Andrew Dowell around because they want him to be the image of Andrew Dowell in the sense that on special teams he's doing all of the things that you want to see out of a rookie. And so I think you see him make the roster. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys like DeMarco who make the roster specifically for special teams. And, if his injury was significant to the point that that you're worried about it, he could go on IR. And I don't think that that's going to be the case. So we'll see on Monday. I think I'm not worried about it yet, but, it's something to watch.
I think Eric Wilson's a guy, too, to watch out at making the linebacker spot, obviously, just because of that veteran experience that he's been in the games before, knows what he's doing.
122 tackles a couple years ago.
Exactly.
With the Vikings. Although we did see the state of that Vikings defense, and Alvin Kamara rode him for 6 touchdowns in a game. So it's hard for me to take that 122 tackle season seriously. Like, look at it this way. If you're allowing a first down and then you get a tackle, and then they get another first down, and then you get a tackle, there's a lot of tackles to be made. So the tackle number is not always an indicator of good football. It's just he's the guy who ends up getting there. And I do wonder about Eric Wilson. I think that he's been getting some first team reps, but they've been really aggressive about they brought in Joe Schobert for a tryout. They brought in Kiko Alonso. It doesn't indicate to me that they're super comfortable with the linebacker room. So, and I think they are comfortable with DeMario and Pete Werner. So it's someone under that level that they're not comfortable with. And I think Eric Wilson is the name where you kind of wonder whether that's the guy that they're kind of shaky on, because I think Andrew Dowell is safely on this roster as a special teamer. So I'm not sure about it. Meredith Lockett, Knob Creek. She wants it. I think I'm drinking Bullet. I have a decanter, so I don't even know what it is. The bottle's gone. It's just in the thing.
Oh, I'm going with Basil Hayden. That's my go-to.
All right. So, Steve, what do you want to talk about? I'm going to go through and see if I can find another good question here.
I would say that just to, really looking forward to obviously the game this week. We got Saints football, and all these practices we've been watching is great, but there's nothing like game action. And I know people laugh when you talk about preseason football, but all these position battles and all these players that you're talking about making the roster. This is what it's all about. This is when the separation truly comes in these games, and the jobs are, quote, won and lost coming up against the Houston Texans, Green Bay Packers, and then even the Chargers game. I know there's not going to be that's usually the worst of the preseason games is your last one. But even in that game, you're still having guys that are battling for roster spots. So as uninteresting and sloppy as the preseason may be, it's still really important, and it's hard. It's hard to watch the play on the field, but it's so important to just lock in on the key positions and seeing what guys are doing to earn their roster spots, because especially for the Saints, there really aren't that many available.
Oh, I agree with you. Murtis thinks we need to send Liam Neeson after Quan, get him back because he's been taken.
I like it.
But
like I mean, you mentioned the two. If the Saints wanted him, they would have signed this guy. And
I mean, if they wanted him, if they really wanted him back, they would have signed him. Back to Black and Gold says, "Who says you can't enjoy a pizza party as an adult?" Steve.
Oh, I'm definitely all about a pizza party. But, when you have a 12-year-old, he's really not interested in hanging out with you anymore. It's all about his buddy. So,
well, what is it? Is it just a friend pizza party, or is it like a team?
He's with a friend and their family. Obviously, they went out for some pizza, even though he just had it yesterday. So he's getting his fix.
So yeah, back to Black and Gold. Seeing as Alvin may be starting the season, what is Marcus May looking like right now with his DUI thing? I don't, I'm not sure. It's kind of up in the air. We never really know what the NFL is thinking with his discipline, because I don't think the NFL knows what the hell it's thinking with his discipline half the time. And I'd like to think that maybe it's a scenario where you could get out of the woods and not have any issues, but it's tough.
His hearing is scheduled to start pretty soon, huh? The DUI case, I believe it's this month.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, and I know that's a different scenario also, where there's the DUI involved and also supposedly also leaving the scene of the crime.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where there's not a lot of information out there.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to comment on it without knowing. The last thing I saw, like the last update I was able to find, was June 1st, and you're kind of it's just one of those things where things get pushed back and things get pushed back.
The great legal system in America.
There was a question that I can't seem to find, and we won't pop it up, but I can relay it. Of all the games on the Saints schedule this year, what would be the most impressive game for them to win? And I'm going to tell you mine, Steve. And if you want to look up the schedule and kind of make your answer while I'm talking, because I always have a lot to say, that'll work. So there's a lot of games that the Saints have to win in order to get to 10, 11 wins, which I think they're going to get to 10, maybe 11. And I think that's where you need to get, and as we saw last year, to really be comfortable in the playoffs. And I think if you get to 10 wins, you're with the extra wild card, you're in there. So you have the Falcons week 1, got to win that. You have the Bucs week 2 at home. I think that's a game the Saints lose, to be completely honest with you. I think that this is finally the game where Tom Brady is just like, okay, enough. But I don't think I think that's fine. I think you can lose that game and be comfortable with it. The most impressive game the Saints could win, I think, would be week. So wait, let me do the math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It would be week 8 in Arizona. And the reason I say that, so DeAndre Hopkins will be back. He suspended the first 6 games, but he will be back for that game. And the reason it would be incredibly impressive for them to win this game, they have week 4 in London. They have week 9 at home against the Seahawks. Then they have, week 5 at home against the Seahawks. Week 6 at home against the Bengals. That's going to be an incredibly difficult game. And then they're playing the Cardinals on Thursday night. So You have a London trip. You don't have a week off after that London trip. So you're dealing with that rest issue. Then you have the Seahawks, a game you should win. Then you have the Bengals, a game you probably should lose based on what we know about the Bengals. And then you have a short week against the Cardinals, a team that is probably, in the top 5 of the NFC, a team that's probably considered a favorite to make some noise and probably get to maybe the NFC Championship. I don't know if they're a favorite to get to the Super Bowl, but that's a schedule loss. Like, there's always games throughout the season where it's a schedule loss, and that's what that is, in my opinion.
Yeah, immediately for me, it was right after that London game, just because it was there's no break for you. You have to go right back and play, but it's home to Seattle, and we know that Seattle team is in a
they're at home against Seattle,
right? And that Seattle team is not anything impressive. Obviously, there could still be a huge letdown there because just that's a really
that trip to London and back. It's not easy.
Man,
we can talk about it all we want, but like these are human beings dealing with jet lag. We've all done it. Like, it's not easy.
And I'm thankful that it is the Seattle Seahawks, and it's not the week after where you get the Bengals coming in, because that would obviously stand out for me. But the Monday night game in Tampa is going to be tough, just because you're at that end of the season too, and it's at Pittsburgh, then you're home to LA, but then at San Fran, and at Tampa. At least you have the extra quote unquote day of rest, because you're playing Monday Night Football from a Sunday in San Fran to Monday Tampa Bay. But that's going to be a tough one for them right there, coming off the West Coast, going all the way to Tampa the next week.
So you think the most impressive win would be week
at Tampa, week 13, right before the bye too.
Okay. See, the only reason I disagree with that is because you're in Tampa on national television, and the last 2 times the Saints went to Tampa and played on national television, they won 38-3 or whatever. No, I'm sorry. They won 38-3 and 9-0. So it's hard for me to see that as impressive. I expect it now.
But that stretch right there, that's 13 weeks of football with no break.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm just saying the precedent has been set that the Saints are going to go to Tampa and dominate. So it's going to be hard. What would they have to do to impress at this point? Win 70-0? I mean, you've already won 38-3. You shut out Tom Brady. It's hard for me to be like, oh, that's impressive now after what we've seen the last 2 years. I don't disagree with you in terms of the difficulty of going there and winning, but it's just the bizarre nature of what they've done in Tampa the last 2 years is kind of skewing it a little bit.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just being able to have that stamina, that durability, that ability just to last 13 weeks, and going into the bye week, a win on the road at a divisional opponent just seems like a beautiful way to wrap it up. I just hope they can pull that off, because it's just that point of the schedule becomes really brutal for them.
No, I don't disagree. And I think that's going to be, whether it's impressive or not, we're kind of splitting hairs here, because it's probably a game the Saints need to win, because like I said, I think they probably lose that week 2 game. I think that's going to be the game where, if Marcus May gets suspended, right? If we do have to deal with that and the safeties aren't ready and you have some issues, Mike T isn't quite up to speed yet. I think he's going to take a couple games to get back into, the Mike T we remember. Maybe that's a game that they lose. And if that's the case, then that game is vital in terms of the division. So I don't disagree. I'm giving you a hard time. I don't disagree with you. Speaking of a hard time, I know I said that I was going to stop talking about Ian Book, but the bourbon has gotten the best of me. St. John Butler. Do you guys think Ian Book makes the active roster, or do they use that slot for another position, since they could use Taysom as an emergency QB behind Winston and Dalton?
Bingo.
Now, on the last podcast, I said I'm going to stop talking about Ian Book because I don't want to be mean to him. I don't have anything nice to say, and that's what my mom told me to do, and that's what I was going to do, but I'm not going to do it. Ian Book has not been very good. Ian Book, every time I see him touch the ball, it just feels like
one read and take off.
It feels like the clock has frozen and there's an ice cube around Ian Book. And he's just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'll scramble in a drill where they can't tackle you. And it's infuriating. It's like, just make a decision and throw the ball. And I like Ian Book. I think that he was a Sean Payton guy, and maybe with a couple more years of working with Sean Payton, maybe with one more season of working with Sean Payton, you could have had a scenario where he finds his way. He looks like a guy who has no confidence. He looks like a guy who, he just ended up in a scenario where it made sense, and then now he's just lost. He's lost in the wilderness. He's not Pete Carmichael's guy. He was Sean's guy, and Sean's gone. And he's just trying to figure it out. And I don't think that he makes the roster. I think what you said at the end there is the safety net of having Taysom on the roster and knowing that in the nightmare scenario that both Jameis and Dalton go down, he could play quarterback. Like, whether you want him to be the quarterback or not, that you can get to a game. You know that he can win a game, right? Like, that's value there. Everyone wants to just brush off, 6-2 as a starter, 7-2 as a starter. But if you end up in a scenario where he has to play, you at least feel like, okay, it's not the end of the world. We can find a way. And that means you don't have to keep 3 quarterbacks. You can be comfortable without him. And I just don't think he's done anywhere near enough to justify taking up a roster spot. I think he probably ends up on the practice squad. And like I said last week, he hasn't done anything to get claimed anywhere else. So he probably does end up on the practice squad.
Yeah, and there's a good possibility that next season we're waiting to see what Jameis Winston does this year. Obviously, Andy Dalton is your veteran backup guy. He knows his role, and you're hoping that Book can be the future, or maybe even a guy that can provide backup stuff. But we're seeing that there's a good chance that none of these quarterbacks are on this roster next year.
I wouldn't say a good chance. I think there's a fair chance that Andy Dalton is not on the roster next year. I mean, Jameis is going to be on the roster next year. The question next year is not whether Jameis is the guy, the question next year is not whether Jameis is on the roster. The question next year is whether you go into it thinking, should we be looking for a young quarterback to kind of, so if it's like you get into next year and what you saw this year does not inspire enough confidence and you want to use Jameis as a bridge to another player, like a Jimmy Garoppolo.
See, but I think that answer.
I don't think I'm not saying that's where we're going to end up, but I think that I don't think there's a scenario where Jameis is just gone, because you don't have the replacement. If you had a young quarterback that you were like, oh, okay, let's see what he has, then maybe you can make the argument, but there's no one. And maybe if you traded him, but if he plays poorly enough that you want to move on from him, then he's not going to be tradable. So I don't see that. But I don't think Ian Book's going to be that guy. And I don't want to be mean to Ian, but I just think that's the reality of the situation.
I don't think it's being mean at all. It's obviously just what we've seen. And that's been the problem with him is just the inability to make that decision and throw the ball. And he's just been we've seen him tuck and run too much.
This is me projecting my concern that they're going to actually make Ian Book available for an interview one of these days. And he's going to go up there and be like, you're that guy. But I'm just trying to be realistic. And I know a lot of people like Ian Book. I think that I give him all the credit in the world for going out there and taking that beating in week 16 of last year where he had no chance. And I don't think that's the reason that he lost his confidence, but he just doesn't have it. And I don't want to be mean to him.
It's never good when your first pass is a pick.
Yeah. I think that the issue for Ian is that he was a 4th round draft pick and he shouldn't have been. And that makes you feel like he's got more invested in him than they do. And with a new coaching staff, I just don't think that's the case. Demetrius Ramsey has a question here. Has Jameson better on the short reads lately? I was talking about this on Saturday, and I have this in my notes from the day 10. I've been putting up notes every day. Go check them out on WWL.com. I try to be really detailed in there. So hopefully they kind of answer a lot of these questions for you. What Jameis today, there was 2 moments where you kind of saw Jameis kind of fighting against his own instincts. And his instincts are always try to make something happen down the field. But now he's in an offense with Alvin Kamara. And when something isn't available down the field, checking it down to Alvin Kamara is an elite option. It is not an afterthought in this offense. It is not an afterthought where you're like, okay, I don't have anything. Let's see what happens. It's got to be a faster reaction. It's got to be nothing's there immediately. How can I get the ball to Alvin? How can I get the ball in Alvin's hands so that he can make something happen? And it's like you can throw a pass -2 yards from the line of scrimmage. Like, obviously, you don't want to throw a backwards pass, but like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, the ball doesn't have to go across the line of scrimmage, but you get it in Alvin's hands, and suddenly it's a 15, 20-yard gain. We all watched that. I've seen that run against the Packers at least 20 times. One of the most incredible plays I've ever seen from a running back. He never went faster than Eric McCoy, and he got all the way to the end zone. If you counted the air yards of that pass, I think it was like -3 yards. Like, it literally was a pass to the boundary. Maybe went 30 yards, but didn't go forward. But it was a touchdown pass for Drew Brees. And those are the passes that Jameis did not make last year outside of Seattle. In Seattle, he made a concerted effort. Alvin had 10 catches for 150 yards. I think he had like 8 catches for a touchdown in the first half. And then they started bracketing Alvin. And when you are forcing a team to bracket your running back in the receiving game, you know how easy that makes life for you? In that game, if you go back and watch it, Jameis was taking shots to Kenny Stills wide open. He was taking shots to Kevin White. If they could catch, it would have been great. They can't catch, so it didn't work. But like, that was the reason they were open, because you established Alvin in the first half of the game, and then they had nothing to cover these guys downfield. Now, if you're talking Chris Olave, you're talking Jarvis Landry, you got Mike Thomas back. Yeah, those targets are a lot. They're catching it. So to kind of get back to the question, today he had that kind of reaction. He scanned downfield, nothing was there. Got us Alvin Kamara in the flat. He did it twice, and I think that is something that's being coached into him. It is not a natural reflex for him. It's just not. He's such a great arm. He's just a great quarterback. He feels like he can always make something happen, but you can't forego Alvin Kamara just as a check down option, because if you are, trade him, because you have to use him if he's in the offense.
Oh my God, you give me a heart attack saying.
I'm not saying you should trade him. I'm just saying if you're not going to use him, then he makes no sense, because he is that good of a receiver out of that field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Alvin Kamara, and it's just the talent that clearly stands above the rest at practice. A guy that's just noticeable. Everything he does. Dennis Allen talked about how he also, just practices the right way, and you want that from your star player, because obviously everybody follows suit as well. You know what I mean? Everyone follows your top dog, and if you got Alvin Kamara given 100% every practice, then why shouldn't I kind of deal? And that burst is there. His speed, the vision on Kamara is something that I joked about it earlier. Just, you can put him away now. I don't even need to see him in training camp practices anymore. I just wanted him ready to go week 1 against Atlanta.
I'm sorry. I was looking for questions, and I kind of tuned out there. I think you made a great point
about Alvin.
Any point about Alvin is great. One thing that if you get to watch a Saints practice, and I know the fans are probably bummed out they didn't get to watch practice today, and I always get bummed out for the fans Saturday. I keep saying today, so keep in mind we're recording this on Saturday. I was out at practice today, and there was thunderstorms, and the Saints facility is set up like a golf course where if there's thunder in the area, there's a horn that goes off and they all go inside. And I always get bummed because the fans are all in the stands. They got their helmets, they got their pens, they got their jerseys, the balls, they get signed, and then the lightning, and then they all go away, and then they'll come back. And it's like, I always feel so bad because all these, especially the kids are out there. It's just like, they just so desperately want an autograph. Yesterday, so Friday at practice, there was like, he couldn't have been older than 7, and Paulson Adebo was standing by the edge of the field, and this kid was there yelling, Adebo! And I just thought it was so funny. I was like, how many fan bases is there a 7-year-old in the crowd who knows the 3rd round pick from last year, the second string cornerback, right? With if he was yelling like Alvin, Kamara, Jameis, that would be one thing. yelling at Debo. And I just thought that was so cool that just this kid is just like, just so, I don't know. It's such a unique fan base and I love it so much. But I don't even know where I was going with that.
The love for football here is definitely clear. And I don't know. We both grew up in the Northeast. And for me, definitely like the football was important in pro football, but college football definitely wasn't as intense over in New Jersey.
No. And like I grew up watching the Giants, and I remember going to Giants games, and it was like that kind of is my just growing up experience of watching football. And I thought that's what like all fan bases were like. The Giants are the most boring fan base in the world. It's all like old dudes from like Fairfield County. And that's why the Saints fan base is so cool, because it's just real people. You know, it's just like people. Like the Whistle Monster lives a block away from me. And it's like that's so cool, and I've always appreciated that. So this is a funny question. Who do you guys think is the front runner for the third running back spot? Well, Chemo, have I got good news for you?
I got a segment
Go listen
for you
to the podcast or just scroll back in this recording, because we talk about this for like 20 minutes. You would be stunned at how long we've just ranted about the third string running back. So you got exactly what you're looking for. Go back in this recording or just listen to Inside Black and Gold when it posts whenever I get around to editing this monstrosity of a recording. And you'll have a good time.
Ian's going to love you sending him all these segments for sure.
Yes, it's going to be a good time. And I mean, like, we could go do this all night. There's still 74 people in this chat. We're getting comments just left and right, questions. I'm going to have to cut it off eventually because like I said, I'm going out of town and I got to get ready. Let's answer one or two more questions, and then we're going to call it. Again, you're listening to Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. I've had a lot of fun with this. I dare any NFL team to try to play man against us. That's Austin Kloska, who just, he's the new JPG. He's here every time, and he always has great insight. And I agree. You're going to have a hard time locking up against if you have Mike Thomas, if you have Jarvis Landry in the slot, if you have Chris Olave in the Z, and then if you have an Adam Troutman that's showing he can just be a reliable pass catcher, and then you have Alvin coming out of the backfield. Ian Rappaport was at Saints camp on Friday, and I've said for a while that I think that the national perspective on this team is very, very, very far away from the local perspective on this team and what they think the ceiling of this team is, right? And so Ian showed up at practice on Friday, and he went on the Pat McAfee show. And I'm not saying Ian had really low expectations for the Saints, but I think that just nationally there's a really low expectations for what this team could do. And he went on Pat McAfee's show and he's like, "Yeah, this is a playoff team." Yeah, I mean, this is a playoff team. Like, you can see it. And whether they can be a Super Bowl contender, that's another question. But this is clearly a playoff team, and you see the weapons they have on offense. Everyone wants to say Jameis can't be a quality quarterback. I mean, you don't need him to be a star. You just need him to play the right way. Trent Dilfer made it to a Super Bowl. Who's the guy from the Bears?
I was going to say Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl.
Brad Johnson made it with the Bucs. Who was that little short dude that made it with the Bears? Florida court. Rex Grossman made it to a goddamn Super Bowl, and he lost to Peyton Manning as he should have. You don't need a perfect quarterback. And I think this team is good enough that, like, if Jameis can be a perfect quarterback, this is a Super Bowl team. I don't think you need to be.
The Twitter sphere is going. The Twitter sphere is going right now. Jeff Nowak is comparing Rex Grossman to Jameis Winston.
That could happen. That could happen. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, like this roster is good enough that, like, everyone. But my point is that people like to hate on Jameis Winston so much that they are downgrading this team just because he's on it. And it's wild to me because I've seen Jameis. Jameis works as hard as anybody. And I think that, especially coming off the knee injury, he's become even more of a maniacal worker. And if you're like Colin Cowherd, he always like, oh, he's so goofy. Like, who cares? You're only goofy if people don't believe in you. And right now, people believe in him on this team, and that's you can't be goofy in that scenario. Now, if he comes out and he starts eating W's and thinks that's serious, that's another question. But I have faith in Jameis. I think Jameis is going to be good. And whether he's great, I don't know. But I think he's going to be good enough for this team to be a playoff caliber team. And once you get there, then you start to learn about a player. Jameis has never played in a playoff game. That is probably my biggest question about Jameis is how will he respond in a playoff atmosphere? And I think they're going to learn that answer this year, assuming he gets healthy or assuming he gets to the end of it healthy. And I think you would have learned last year if he had gotten to the end of the season healthy last year. And we just didn't get that chance.
The biggest thing with Jameis, and for whatever reason it is with him, is the fact that it's the year he led the league in interceptions with 30, but the fact that he passed for 33 touchdowns and 5,000 plus yards gets overlooked, and he led the league in passing yards, had 30 touchdowns, but he also led the league in interceptions, and everyone wants to focus on the interceptions instead. And I mean, we've seen the no risk it, no biscuit, no biscuit, no risk, whatever he says, in Tampa Bay. The mentality of that passing attack definitely was more aggressive, and we've seen Jameis be a more reserved guy that is taking less chances now. And I think that's obviously the key too, is not forcing it. And especially what you mentioned before with when you've got a guy like Alvin Kamara to check down to, please throw it the -1, -2 yards to Alvin, and he'll make it to positive.
Right. If I could make like a birthday wish to like Jameis, I just need Jameis. Like, I need you to just and to his credit, he knows this. This is not something that he does not understand. And you saw in like week 6 against the Seahawks, he threw to Alvin over and over and over again. And then he came back against the Bucs and he got hurt after the first quarter. So he never really had a chance to follow up on that. But I think if you got further in the season, like week 4 the loss to the Giants, Alvin didn't catch a pass. Jameis knows that was a mistake. Like, he knows that was not the way that this offense should operate. And so, like, to his credit, like he's working on that. And I think that he'll be better. But yeah, he's like, I think that there's going to be points in this season where you're like, okay, we need to remind you that Alvin Kamara is the best receiving back in the NFL, bar none. And you need to get him the ball however you can. And one of the last things we'll get to, actually, okay, we have this, and then we have one more question, and then we'll cut it off. Jameis is better than Stafford. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, just because we've seen Matthew Stafford for a long time, and we've seen him. He's a veteran quarterback, right? Jameis has not been around that long, and I mean, after what you saw Matt Stafford do last season, I think that is where you're not going to argue with the quality of Matt Stafford. But I put Jameis and Stafford in very similar, like airs of like the quality of quarterback play. And if Matt Stafford can lead a quality team with an excellent defense to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl once he's surrounded with weapons in a way that he was not over the last however many years in Detroit, then there's your argument right there for why Jameis is more than quality enough to get to the playoffs and potentially lead this team. Because I think that he does a lot of the same things Stafford does. I think that he is kind of that gunslinger type quarterback who can do a lot of things, but has never really been on a roster that suited his skill set. And then you put him in the right situation and you can make a run. And I think that, whether he's better than Stafford, it doesn't really matter. I think that quality wise and arm talent wise, they can both do a lot of the same things.
With Stafford though, I would definitely say I would probably have the edge over. I would go with him over Jameis just by a slight hair, but I do have them.
You've seen them in playoff
tier, the same tier.
To me, the biggest difference between Jameis and Stafford right now is that Matt Stafford has won playoff games, and we have not seen Jameis in that scenario. It's not that he can't; he did it in the college. Like he's clearly clutch in that scenario, but we just haven't seen him get the chance to do it. And until you get there and get the chance to do it and show us that you are that clutch playoff guy, the way Joe Burrow did last year, it's going to hold you a little bit below. Not that you can't be there, but we just, not knowing is not confirmation or negative.
With Burrow though, I don't know if there was ever a question. That dude, we just knew he had it.
Yeah. Okay, last question, and then we gotta go. We've been doing this for 2.5 hours. I've had a lot of fun. Y'all have been great. But I gotta pack. How do you think this is
That's the
Marcus
worst
Ryan?
part of going on vacation.
This is Marcus Ryan, Matt Ryan's cousin. Most people don't know that about Marcus. How do you think Juwan Johnson does in his second year as a tight end? So there's a few things about Juwan Johnson. One, he's gotten a little thicker. He's got some junk in the trunk. He's up to 250, which he converted from wide receiver as you alluded to there. And I think it was a struggle for him at times trying to understand how to run routes in line, how to block, how to assert himself as a tight end, and kind of use his body in the way he needs to dominate as a pass catcher at the tight end position, because it's different. It's different than being a wide receiver. And I think that he's woken up a little bit in the second week of camp. In minicamp, in OTAs, it felt like he was trying to be a wide receiver in terms of how he was running routes. He was trying to catch stuff on the run. He was trying to finesse too much. And when you're a 250-pound guy, you just have to bully people. And there was a play the other day where he went up and he just mossed Daniel Sorensen. And that to me is like an indicator that he's starting to understand how he needs to play, which is you're a big dude, you're strong. They're not going to be able to move you. You just got to go through them. And if he can start doing that more often and more frequently, I think that he can be an impact. And I think he and Taysom Hill are going to have an interesting kind of battle in terms of who can assert themselves more at that move tight end position. I think that Lucas Krull is trending the wrong direction. I said that last week. I think that he's a practice squad guy at this point. He might be able to build himself up in the preseason games and maybe make him a serious run at the roster. But I think Juwan has a chance. I think that, they kept him around. They feel like he has value. And I think he's the first week. If you asked me after OTAs and minicamp, I would have told you he's going to have a uphill battle to make the roster. But I think what I've seen from him in the last week specifically has really encouraged me in terms of what he can do.
The thing is too with tight end though, it's like how many do you keep here for this team? And I don't know, with the addition to also now of Chris Herndon at the tight end spot, I just think it gets a little harder for Juwan Johnson, obviously. And we mentioned it. I think with the running back position is key for the preseason. The tight end position is going to be pretty big as well. There's a lot of names there. And sadly, I tend to agree with you too with Lucas Krull, where there's a lot of hope with the undrafted free agent out of Pitt, but it just hasn't been enough flashes even.
Hasn't translated. He's had some technical issues. Coaches have been getting after him. And I think he has a chance to develop. I just don't think that's not going to be this year.
Right.
And that's not unusual for a UDFA, right? It's very rare for UDFA to show up and be an impact player in year one. You almost never see it. And
I think because of obviously his numbers in college and the size and the want at tight end, there was a lot of hope there from Houdads.
There's people in the comments talking about Sarah McLachlan. If you can hear that, I'm out of bourbon. So I think that means it's time to wrap this show up. Again, my name is Jeff Nowak. I'm alongside Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold. I've had a really fun time talking to y'all. And make sure to mash that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate that. If you could go over and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you watch your podcast, listen to your podcasts, that'd be great too, because we like y'all over there, and subscriber numbers are important to us. They help us out.
Download the Odyssey app. Eventually, we'll be there.
Download the Odyssey app. Yeah, we've been having some trouble getting on the Odyssey app, even though we work for Odyssey. We don't. It's definitely not a thing that's been driving me nuts. Don't worry about that. We're going to keep coming at you. As I said, I'm taking a couple days off. I'm getting some rest, but I'll be right back at it at Saints Camp later in the week. Steve's going to be out there Monday through Wednesday. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Steve Geller WWL. I'll be going radio silent after today through Wednesday because I'll be up in Montana, hopefully without cell reception, but you can still follow me if you want at Jeff_Nowak. Make sure to check out WWL.com for the latest Saints coverage and all that jazz. Check out Sports Talk Monday through Friday, 4 to 8 p.m. on AM 870, FM 105.3. And thanks so much for following along. Who dat?
Appreciate you folks, and we'll see talking to you soon, and definitely pregame coverage Saturday night.
Yikes.
Yeah.
All right. Peace, y'all.
Later.
All right. The podcast's over. Now we're just on YouTube. We have a whole nother segment planned. It's going on for... No, I'm just kidding. Definitely not happen. Never.
And it keeps going and going.
We're going to sleep. Well, I'm not, because I got to pack and I got to like vacuum the house so my fiance doesn't scream at me when we get home. And the dog is like probably got to go for a walk. Anyway, thanks so much. Thanks so much, y'all. We are hitting the 2.5 hour mark. We still have, like I did not think that we were going to come on here and go for 2.5 hours. That was not the plan, but y'all have been so engaged, and I love talking to everybody that we just stayed on for this long. So I do appreciate it. I can't say enough how much I appreciate that. Thanks so much for Steve for humoring me, because I don't think he planned for this either, but it's been a lot of fun. I really did enjoy it.
Definitely can't wait for more.
Peace, y'all.